Oh my god. Hello everybody in the booming Twitch chat. How are you? Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to Firing Range, a podcast to talk about all things Destiny, weapons, abilities, loadouts, the sandbox at large, and Drew's haircut. And tonight we have a very special episode lined up for all of you. But before I go around the table and introduce everybody, I want to put out clear expectations for tonight's show. The two gentlemen we have here are from Bungie. And yeah, they both work directly with the D2 Sandbox. We are a sandbox show, and that is what they're here to talk about. Shocker. Bungie is aware that the community is clamoring for new maps, and the community wants elaboration on the future of anti-cheat, all that good stuff. And while we would love to sit here and talk about that with both Kevin and Chris, they're here to take our potentially far too detailed questions about both subclasses and the weapon sandbox specifically, and we really appreciate them being on the show. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest for tonight. First, we have the abilities feature lead and sandbox discipline lead, Kevin Yanis. Hello, Kevin.
Hello.
There he is. And we've got, who do we got here? Weapons feature lead on D2, Chris Proctor. Hello, Chris.
Hey, everybody.
Chris is currently battling his webcam. We hope he'll pull out on top. Things seem to be looking good for right now. So one more thing to clarify before we get into the real meat of the show is that the boys and I have all talked. We're going to jump in every now and then, but the goal is to let both Kevin and Chris talk a lot. So if you're out there wondering, oh, why is Cammy not talking a whole lot? Cammy pretty much told me before the show went going, he goes, if you want me to be on mute the whole night, I'll be on mute.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything unless directly asked. Like, we're ready.
We're here to talk to
Bungie.
Bungie. Yeah. So we're going to start off with a bunch of questions for Kevin because Kevin is more on the clock here. We've convinced Chris to potentially stay around for longer, but in the name of time, skip all the other intros. Let's dive into it right now. Starting with Kevin. So, why don't we talk a little bit, or have you talk about the design philosophy of Stasis, right? Why don't we just dive right into the deep end with Stasis? So, could you possibly tell us and the listeners at home, what were your initial hopes for Stasis, and what was your expectation of how you hoped Stasis would overall impact PvP?
Sure, yeah. I think initially when we started it, we looked at the suite of abilities we had for the combat sandbox at large and the light subclasses, and they were all really focused on damage. The notable exceptions being, the Sentinel, Ward of Dawn, and the Dawn Blades, Well of Radiance. Sorry, I get the
Sure.
internal, external names confused. So if I take a pause, it's because I'm trying to
Sure.
translate them. And so yeah, we wanted something that was more teamwork centric, something that you there was definitely a vision in our head that was the lesser skilled player, lower skilled player could play one of these subclasses and still provide value in things like GMs, because they could pause, especially champions, right? That was the use case, was specifically on the Glassway when you're getting bombarded by champions, a dude could just pause and create a breather for their team and then regroup, and then when rely on their light buddies to be the damage. And it was definitely a PvE fantasy. And then on the PvP side, we initially hoped for we wanted this fantasy of countering the unbridled aggression that the game currently has. We definitely looked at the game and how it played at the time, and saw a clear need for something to shut down the the shotgun rushers, the pogoing hunters, something that felt like you had an opportunity other than also rush, also pogo, or back off. Because I'm not a big believer in the back off strat unless it's to reposition.
Are we talking about the back off strat in PvP, specifically?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, specifically in PvP. I think to me, the least fun thing you could ever tell a player is go have fun somewhere else because you can't win this one. That should never be an answer that we give a player.
Gotcha. Okay. After Stasis had kind of made its initial splash, and the community had reacted. Did your vision of how stasis would exist in the PvP sandbox, did it change immediately? And what did the vision change to once we saw it in practice?
Yeah, as we mentioned in the, I'm gonna say twab, and someone's gonna get mad about that, but in the twab, it was definitely a thing during development where we were like, why would anyone ever choose to like freeze a dude versus one-shotting, right? Because like a lot of the other light abilities have one-shot capabilities, and we were like, why would you ever do this? Why would you ever do this? And in development, I think that like haunted us to the point where we just kind of kept turning it up and up and up and up until we were like, okay, this feels good. And there was this like, and you know, and this is not to make excuses, but we were doing it in a paradigm they would never done it before, right? Like we're doing it all over remote, and with a relatively new team. And so I think when we shipped it, the kind of consensus we had was, yep, we're going to have to nerf that. And we expected, at least I think the quote I gave one of our gameplay specialists before they left was like, I expect to hit this about 3 or 4 times before we get it into a place where I'm like comfortable with it. So we kind of knew out the gate, but I think the reactions kind of painted the picture on like the timeline that needed to happen.
Right,
sure. If that makes sense. Yeah.
It's interesting to hear that the initial thought was like, oh, why would you freeze people when, like, I guess you were thinking about maybe like one-hit shoulder charge abilities maybe, or the handheld supernova, or like
well, it was like handheld weighted throwing knife, all the shoulder charges.
Right.
In conjunction with like some of the abilities, some of like the grenades, for instance, that you know, and mind you, like stasis started out. I'll give you a little bit of behind the scenes. Like the freezing started out as no bleed through. It was like 100 HP shield, and you like didn't do a ton of damage to it, and so it was just painful. Like it didn't feel like, yeah, you could pause a dude, but that was basically all you did, and it felt super dissonant to the rest of the game that was about like constantly like handling an encounter, finding the next one. And stasis felt like at that time like, oh well, all right, I'm gonna deal with this one guy for upwards of 5 seconds, and like to me that's nuts. In a game like Destiny, one target for 5 seconds is nuts. So we kept like moving that along, and I think there's this other thing where intrinsically like people understand value of a thing when they're able to like defeat a combatant. So there was just like friction that we were dealing with that was not only like, I don't really understand the implicit value in freezing somebody in a game that's about constantly running and gunning, and then there's the second thing, which is like, I can't perceive the value as easily as I can perceive Golden Gun, because Golden Gun just fucking deletes somebody.
Sure.
So that was like the rope we walked, and we kept walking that probably a little too much, because like we really put Arc, Solar, and Void up on this pedestal of like, you know, those are, we called them the main characters of our game, right? Those are the Ryu and Kens of our quote unquote fighting game.
Yeah, sure. That's very interesting. So like, how has let me phrase it this way. If I were to ask somebody like Drew, what would your value, what is your vision of, well, not vision, what do you bring to the table, Drew? If you were to roll into PvP with a Revenant Hunter, I'm sure Drew could bang out a list of like, here's exactly what I'm bringing to the table with the Revenant Hunter. Here's how my Revenant Hunter fits into the team that he's playing on in PvP. So, you know, stasis is getting tweaked. The night that we're recording this right now, tomorrow is the big, I don't know the number, 3.2. I can't remember the number. The big stasis patch coming tomorrow. So now that you have done these tweaks behind the scenes, like, do you have a very clear definition of like stasis in PvP should be blank? Anything to that degree? Like what role should it fill right now?
I think I'm going to paint that more nebulously as like what our success criteria for tuning it is.
Okay.
Right. And as Eric mentioned, like the thing we're looking at is really looking at making sure that the win rates are equal, or at least it's more close to equal than they are now. I mean, it's balance is a ongoing conversation with Destiny. I don't think you're ever going to get something that's 100% perfectly tuned or perfectly fair for everything. in terms of role, I think that's going to be really difficult to say because I think the role within any given subclass now can vary pretty hard depending on your fragment and aspect definition, right, and whatever you're loading out with. So, I'll go to say is I players who pick stasis, I think I expect them to go for more of a defensive role, more of an aggressive shutdown role. But I suspect in terms of power efficacy, we're looking at something that is closer to how you would be succeeding with any given light subclass.
Okay, fair. Cool guy, by the way, do you have the document open right now? Spare?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna tag that. I'm gonna hit up this last question regarding our talk about stasis. Then you want to hit up the next brick questions there because we never really pinned that down. The abilities and the sandbox cues.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't give you enough cues. So here we go, Kevin.
Sure.
So now that you've brought a new subclass into D2 and like you kind of had that pre-vision of how you wanted it to be, the reality of how it came in like a goddamn wrecking ball, has the reception of stasis kind of altered your plan or your vision or Bungie's plan for maybe the introduction of another future dark subclass? Like if we were to get more, how has stasis kind of affected how you're planning potential future subclass releases?
Let me make sure I wave to the snipers real quick so they know that I'm not gonna leak anything.
It's okay, Dylan. Don't worry.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm not going to comment on anything obviously new that we're going to make. I think.
Sure.
Yeah. With anything we make, obviously, all the feedback we get, we're gonna learn from. It becomes a lens that we focus through in the future, in the same way that we have from D2 vanilla onwards. So, I'm gonna restructure your question in a way that I can answer without getting shot. And that is, have we learned from the rollout of stasis, and are we going to apply that to anything new we do in the future? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Like, I really meant what I said and what I wrote in that in that TWAB, Bob. PvP is like near and dear to my heart. I think I saw a Twitter comment. It was really funny. They were like, "Oh man, do the devs even play?" It was a response to this, by the way. Do the devs even play their game? It's atrocious. It's awful right now. I'm like, yeah, man, dude. We all pull up a big old bowl and we take a big old bite out of it every goddamn day. And when it's rough for us too. Like, I want you to know, I sat there and ate a face full of shurikens on trials as well. Like, and at no point was I like, man, you know what, guys, we killed it. Like, no, there's obviously something there that needs to be fixed. So yes, we totally learned from it. Yes, I think PvP for us is going to be a focal point and a lens that we're going to look through things with more scrutiny than we did before, especially if we introduce things like crowd control further.
Fair
I feel
enough.
like it may be worth speaking to just how much sandbox designers in particular play our game. Like, Kevin is just always in PvP. I did not an enormous amount, but like 200 Grandmasters last season.
Oh wow.
Raid all the time. Yeah, we play the crap out of our game. Just also a note on stasis. I think anything which freezes players has got to be hard mode. I can't imagine any other element that we could do in the future that could be anywhere near as hard as it.
I mean, when you put it like that, then again, I mean, never say never, right? I was like, I feel like that's classic. You've just given the community perfect clip fuel, Chris. Damn it. How could it get any worse than stasis?
No,
it can't get any harder than freezing people. Fast forward to Witch Queen. What happened?
Yeah, not to
I'm just kidding, of course.
I think that's fine. Like, honest to God, because none of us want to fucking lie to anybody. So yeah, if a clip comes out and it gets shoved in our face, yeah, it feels shitty. But at the same time, we're like, oh, we did say that, didn't we? We should probably do something about that, huh? So that's
fair. Hey man, we appreciate the transparency here. No bullshit.
No bullshit.
No bullshit. Cool guy. Do you want to take us away here to ability land?
Yeah. I want to bring us to just abilities in the sandbox. I mean, PvE, PvP. So
like light or dark, doesn't matter what it is. Like, what is your vision for how these abilities should influence the combat? Because the Guardian itself, man, the gunplay, the movement is great, but we have these abilities.
Yeah.
How should it influence?
I'm gonna point back to the TWAB here and say it depends. It depends on your activity. I think the balance we have right now in PvE for the most part is largely positive. I think there's something to be said about higher end difficulty and abilities role there, but I'm not gonna sign any checks today that I may or may not want to cash. On the PvP end of things, though, I definitely think there's room for a translation there. As I mentioned, post season 15, we're looking at the ability regen economy and thinking about we're thinking about not only how often abilities regen, but then what power that affords, right? Like, I'm going to say something that's hyper provocative, and this is the thing that I use to generate conversations at work. But it is not what I'm going to make it ultra clear. What I'm about to say is not a thing we're doing, so don't take it as that. But it is an idea that paints the example of what, like, the way we're thinking about this, which is, I think you can have a grenade theoretically that one shot that is a skill shot, and it's on a super low cooldown. It requires a lot of effort to pull off, but it has a lot of efficacy. And on the other hand, we could have a 10-second grenade that doesn't really do a lot of damage. Maybe it is something as simple as like it knocks somebody back, for instance, right? Like, that's not a real thing, but that's, like, again, the way we're looking at the conversation. So how these things fit into the sandbox, I think what we're looking at is shifting combat and PvP over more towards gunplay. The abilities are going to be the things that you tip the fight in your favor. In some cases, if they're super high skill shots or they require a lot of situation, or you've build crafted towards it, you're going to be able to one shot. You're going to be at some cadence, but the goal there is not, I feel like, not to end up where we're at today, where I feel like I could probably build pretty heavily into starting every fight with a cold snap, and that's even on a longer timer than, say, arc bolts.
Okay. And you put those three on the pedestal, our light subclasses. What do you see as the future for those light subclasses?
So yeah, I mean,
Keep checking for Cosmo. Yeah, he could be back there.
I'm not that fast, I promise. In terms of the future, like, there's I think I think there's a very clear subset of, like, things we can do to the light subclasses. How do I answer this? It's definitely a balancing act whenever you go think about touching those guys, because there's such a strong identity and attachment to that identity to them. To paint a picture, like when I touched Top Tree Dawn, which I largely believe was like a heavy buff, when we first presented that, there were a whole shitload of people upset that Swift Strike was gone, right? Like, that it got replaced by Celestial Fire. And that, like, totally bewildered me, because I'm sitting there thinking, well, I just gave you, like, magic missiles, like, and they're tracking, like, how could you not love this? I'm going to answer that with, like, a non-answer, which is, there's totally stuff we're thinking about doing. Nothing I could talk about today, but anything we do, I think, needs to stay in the confines of things that people love today, and things that people love about the identities and the fantasies of those subclasses today. And specifically, actually, to drive it even further to, like, combat role, like, I don't think we could take something that it's all about guns, like the Gunslinger, and then turn it into, like, the all about fire, all about explosions class.
Okay. So these we talked about the cooldowns a second ago. The stasis having the longer cooldowns. And in case you guys didn't know, the stasis is a little bit longer than light subs, but you still have the abilities quite often. What do you think about the current state of ability cooldowns right now in the game?
I'm gonna, like, blanket it, and then I'll dive into it. I think they're too fast. And I think that's, there's a large variety of reasons that could be it from just our end on the cooling down, any of the, like, fragments or aspects that let you kind of, like, build your loop in, and then there's the added, weapon perks, armor mods, armor perks, exotic armors that, and then dive into that. And we've talked across the sandbox teams. There's 3 sandbox teams: abilities, weapons, and armor, that all have their own feature leads. And I think Chris, myself, and Rodney kind of got together when we first talked about this a couple of months ago about about what we could do there, and I think we're all kind of like on board of whatever we need to do. I think to like meaningfully move the needle, so long as we know where the needle needs to be, we're on board with. So yeah, I think it's a bit too fast. And I think I'll put it this way: whenever we change ability cooldowns, we're probably also going to change the potency of the abilities, because I don't think you can live in a world where we're just like, let's a provocative example here. Void. Ooh, I don't know what they're called. The scatter grenade.
What's the inner code there?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't gonna. Nope. The scatter grenade. That one, I think that would be a one where if we were like, oh man, it's too strong, we need to turn it down, or whatever. We're like, oh, it does tons of damage, because on paper it does. We need to turn it down, and then players use it and they're like, what the fuck is this? Like, are you kidding me? Like 2 minutes for this? Because they're really fucking hard to hit. Like they're super situational. So in a world where we're like, oh, we want to make we think scatter grenade should be stronger, we'll do things to tune that potency upwards. Alongside like an ability to regen rate change.
And you have like an outlier, like a Sunbracers for that cooldown for that exotic, just to keep throwing those out as an outlier.
Yeah, you're building into it.
Yeah, and so that's the thing I want to touch on, because that was one of the pillars that we talked about, which is I actually think that stuff's really fucking cool. Like I think it's cool when you can nerd out about Destiny and come up with cool combinations and then bring it to your friends and say, I figured out this thing, right? We actually want to reward that. So Sunbracers is an example where I'm like, yeah, we probably want to do more of those things. So yeah, okay. There's like some amount of work of like putting the build together and then executing on that build that should be rewarded more.
So you mentioned knowing where the needle needs to be. When I heard we were getting Sandbox developers on the podcast, this was one of the most important questions to set the foundation for, I think, a lot of our content here. And that question is, if you could pick a subclass that represent your target strength for overall balance, what would it be?
We have talked about this a lot before tonight's show. This one particular question.
Hard question.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I'm gonna let you answer this one as well, because I think this one is so taste driven, and what I might believe might not be the right thing for the entire community. And like, I should actually mention that's like a super important part of the job is like, yeah, there's stuff that I love or stuff that I dislike that I would, if I was given, blank check, I would totally change, but it's not necessarily what's right for the community, right? Like we're making this game just as much for them as for ourselves. So yeah, let me ponder on that before I give you an answer, because I feel like that's going to be like
a couple subclasses maybe to fit different needs, just so we can get an idea of that.
Yeah, but that's tricky, because I think there's like different spectrums. I think on the game balance spectrum, I'm somewhere between like a bottom tree Voidwalker or a like, in some aspects, a top tree Stormcaller. Okay. But then there's like the fucking fantasy side of me that's like, yeah, but Top Tree Dawn is the shit. Like that's the thing that I actually like.
Dawn's total freedom.
Like there's a version of this game where it's like anime as fuck and Top Tree Dawn is the bar, but I don't think that's actually where we want to be.
You don't think you want to be at the bar of Top Tree Dawnblade?
No, I mean, like I'll say it out loud for anyone who's like thinks it's a secret, but like Top Tree Dawn's way too hot, way too strong. It's not a surprise. It's not a surprise, I feel like, to anyone.
I like that answer. There are some classes where there's a target, but being anime as fuck is pretty cool.
That's the dance though, right? It's like, at least for me, it's like anime balance. Where do we fall on this?
Is that actually what you have written on the big whiteboard in the conference room? We're like, okay, here we go. We have anime here, balance over here. We have to balance the scale.
I've been told
the anime scale.
There was a couple months ago where I was locked into Middle Tree Arcstrider for a charity thing, and other people started copying. And so I popped a super, another dude pops a super because he's not going to let a streamer kill him. I cancel, and then I Devil Ruin him because it goes through it. And that's when I just adjusted the glasses, like, got you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's like a Bible anywhere that's like, oh, anime is the way to go, but it's definitely a thing on the abilities team that we talk about of like, how do we navigate we call it the player fantasy, right? Or the power fantasy versus the mechanical fantasy or the mechanical power.
I know what you're getting at. I got the Morosel body pillow too. Like, we're in there.
Do you think there's any subclasses?
Jesus Christ.
Do you think there's any
What you-
subclasses that have successfully achieved both within and like so like you think that it's like anime gaming, but like also like pretty balanced
You know,
in the current game?
I think after Solar Update, I'm like pretty jazzed about where bottom. Well, I think I'm pretty jazzed about where Bottom Tree Gunslinger ended up. Though I recognize it's not necessarily the strongest, but I think that's
It's
a
so fun
place
to play.
where, right, like the mechanical is super fun and the fantasy is pretty fucking rad, right? Like that knife throw flourish that Drew did was
That's good,
incredible.
yeah.
And there's a version of that where I think that could be, honest to God, that could be the bar that you would shoot for, because like I think that's like pretty. It's got its strengths, it's got its weaknesses, but then it's got the power expression that we totally love about it.
We talked about ability cooldowns. I know
Mhm.
just a moment ago, but I was wondering, we didn't touch on the cooldowns of or the super regeneration as an ability cooldown in
Mhm,
intellect,
mhm,
and right
mhm.
now it's
Mhm.
really influential in the entire
Yes.
game.
Yeah.
Especially at high level, especially when you're playing trials where rounds can go the distance, it becomes incredibly influential. What are your thoughts on the current state of super regen intellects as a stat, etc.?
We're super early, so it's like really tough for me to like plant flags, but I'll say I think there's room for a change on where the super economy ends up, specifically for PvP. I want to make that like abundantly clear that like we're with this change, we're not really looking at dramatically shifting the balance in PvE. We're pretty happy of where it's at, with the exception of like I think high level difficulty could potentially use some tweaks there, but for the most part, we don't want to blow that up without good justification. I don't think a good justification exists right now. In terms of PvP, yeah, like I'm not going to give you specifics, but I'll tell you what I like and dislike. I think it's cool that you can build into more supers. I'm not sure I love the fact that they're passive right now.
Nice.
So being able to build into supers passively?
I'm just like that there's a thing you can do in the game with your armor, with your exotics, or let's say with your fragments and aspects, which I don't actually think any of those combinations exist on that spectrum. But like there are things you can do that lets you build into more supers in general, right? There's a fantasy that is like I'm the guy that brings the supers and consequently the orbs to the table.
Gotcha. Okay. Trying to look over. We've jumped around our little. I knew this would happen. We've jumped around the document a wee bit, and that's fine. Cam, did we skip over anything that we wanted to keep going under the?
Can I poke at a thing?
Oh,
Let's
poke
see,
away,
Ascendant Nomad.
poke away, brother.
Yeah, so Ascendant Nomad said that they can't, in a mocking tone, that they couldn't separate sandboxes. We're not talking about separating sandboxes. To be clear, there's like a very key strength to Destiny that is my guy everywhere. I think where we can, we're looking at making targeted changes to help make the separate activities feel cohesive or even just like well paced, well balanced, or well tuned. I hate using the B word because it implies something totally different. Yeah, but like for the most part, we want your Guardian to play like your Guardian everywhere. We want the sandbox to be the sandbox everywhere. We think that's like part of the superpower of Destiny. So we're not super interested in diverging that experience anytime soon.
That's fair. I'm gonna hit you with one more question right now regarding abilities, and then I think Merc desperately wants to take the wheel regarding movement ability specifically, which should be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Yum, yum.
Do you find that the fundamental identity, because I feel like we hear folks at Bungie talk a lot about like the identity of a subclass. Do you find the fundamental identity of any of the subclasses flawed in the current sandbox?
Flawed's a word. well, it's kind of hard, right? Because I don't want to pick anyone's baby and say you're the wrong one.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Well, and that's not like internally. I mean, externally, like if you identify with Chaos Reach, and this is an example, I don't actually believe this about Chaos Reach, but I'm like Chaos Reach that one's all messed up. Then I feel like I'm like calling out Chaos Reach players. Are there fantasies that I think could be better aligned? Absolutely. It depends, right? Like on the spectrum. So like emotionally, this is one I like to poke out as like kind of a joke. It's not actually a thing where I'm like, oh, I think this is super bad that we need to fix. But like emotionally, the gunslinger is supposed to be the gunslinger. He's the guy about precision tools. And I think it's like really funny that middle path is like all about burning and blades. Like that I think would be like a miss on the fantasy side of things.
Pour one out for middle tree gunslinger right now.
Yeah. It's like, hey,
but it's rad as fuck, right? Like the fantasy is totally sweet. So.
Oh yeah, when you fan those knives with M&K all heads, like it's nice.
That's very fun. Yeah, it's like, welcome to the clan of weapon accuracy, fellow hunter. What do you bring to the table? I have hot knives. It's like, okay, cool. And and by the way, Kevin, there is nothing fucking wrong with calling out Chaos Reach. Just wanted to make that very clear to you.
Hold the phone, because like again, like let's hop onto the anime spectrum. There's nothing wrong with the Kamehameha, just to be clear. Like I'm totally down to that.
Yeah, that definitely has the anime power fantasy peg down.
Yeah.
I am not thrilled about being Kamehameha through a wall on Exodus Blue Trials, but the one part is down.
The splash is certainly very big, and I think the team knows that.
I'm sure they are. He's like sitting at Bungie. Are you aware that the players are not happy with Chaos Reach splash through like walls?
That's news.
Are you kidding me?
That's news to me.
Get the fuck out of here. You
that's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. Any other surprises?
Yeah, right.
No, I don't mean to meme. Like, I know at times we could feel like a black box, and so, yeah, I hope the one thing I can do here is instill confidence that, like, again, we're sitting along those strikes, we're raiding, we're grandmastering, we're playing PvP, we're getting absolutely destroyed by recovs, in trials. Like we're right there with you. So, I know at times it might feel like our presence is dark, but I hope that you can recontextualize that as that's because we're doing things to make the game better.
Of course, dude. You're preaching to the choir here. You're not talking to a bunch of. No, you know what? I'll save that for later. Merc, why don't you take it away, buddy, with a little talk about movement abilities here.
Yeah, that was really fantastic, everything you said. So I kind of want to shift the focus a little bit to the current meta, like what's going on. There, when you put guns to the side and you talk just about the subclasses, there are two things that really stand kind of like head and shoulders above everything else. And it's movement and supers right now. Like those are the all important, the holy grail of what you can do with them. Right now, roaming supers in particular are very heavily prioritized, with the exception of Chaos Reach for its own reasons, right? But roaming supers, Behemoth, Top 3 Dawn. Prior to that, it was Spectral Blades, Striker Titan. Like you've got these ridiculous roaming supers that seemingly last an absurd amount of time and have the potential to rack up 7 kills compared to previous sandboxes where Fist of Havoc was, one big AoE, Nova Bomb was a big thing. Is that an intended design decision that you guys wanted to try to influence, or was that kind of because of the way players were playing the game, we started shifting more in that direction?
Okay, a couple things. So first, I'm going to say that I have like the utmost respect for the previous Sandbox team. I'm not gonna kind of guess at their intent here. I can't really speak to some of the like why we transitioned to a lot of the roamers. I can speak to my experience on Stasis for sure, and like Season of Dawn related stuff. I think the part of what you're feeling is, I think, a constraint of the current energy economy system, where right now we're kind of valuing all supers at the same board, even though they don't have the same levels of potency. That conversation, I think, gets a little more interesting in a world where we get to separate those out, right? Like there is a world where the roamers are longer cooldowns than the single panics, and then you have a reason to run them versus another, which is right now not true. I think part of it is like it's really easy creatively to sell somebody an idea, and sell, I mean, as in like emotionally convey, not as in with money. It's a lot easier to emotionally convey an idea with a roamer than it is a one-off panic, because a one-off panic you have, X number of frames to communicate an emotion that is readable in combat, and then a fantasy. Where a roamer, you have the full-on cast, you have any locomotion that they're doing, any idling, any animations on the attacks. Like the canvas to paint there is much larger. So it's not. I don't think it's a secret that our team loves the roamers, because I think there's a lot more creativity that can be expressed through them. But for me, I think I'm like really partial to the idea of the one-off supers, because I think there's this really interesting thing where you can like look at your radar gutter and say there's a problem in that next room and have a fantasy of how you're going to solve it and then go solve it. Whereas the roamers just feel more like, okay, now I just have, it's funny, Sage used to call it the scepter of donging, but now I have the scepter of donging and I'm just going to go. And so I don't think, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yes, there's a rhyme or a reason. I think as we move forward, we're going to better position those so that the value proposition for a player is more clearly understood. Because I think today, the value of a Nova Bomb is not that much greater than that of a Top Tree Dawn, for instance. And most of the time, the reason you pick one over another is because of the combination of the loop, the neutral loop, and not necessarily of the super. And so I would I think in the future, I would love to live in a world where I'm like, I'm running Nova Bomb because I get them faster than I would Nova Warp. But the kill potential in Nova Warp is much higher. And so I'm hedging my bets based on my playstyle.
Yeah, that's that fantasy you have when you're running around. We've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but we said the original fantasy for Behemoth must have been the invincible Mario star, where you just run around and just annihilate everything. You got
no, it was weird. We called it Frost Hulk internally, right? And so like there's this clear image in my head of the Hulk in the first Avengers, like leaping between buildings and just smashing the Chitauri. And I think that like is definitely present in the V1 version of Behemoth.
absolutely very cool. All right, well, besides supers, the second thing we want to talk about, movement abilities. There's a lot of them right now. Obviously, we've got Crowdplasm on the Behemoth Titan, we've got Icarus Dash, we've got Stompies with the exotic on the Hunter. There's a lot of movement abilities right now, and it seems like they're extremely rewarding, especially for how much risk there is inherent in using those things. Kind of the gist of this question is, do you think that those top tier movement abilities or exotics, do you think potentially they're in such a place that they maybe are overshadowing gunplay or good positioning, or do you think they're more complementary of those things in their current state?
I'm going to lean in for this one because I think this is a very important answer.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, here we go. Get close now.
That was it. It was yes. Yeah, I think there's this like meme I've seen perpetuated where Destiny's like a movement based game, and like that's relatively new. If you go back and look at like D1 PvP, even in the Rise of Iron stage, like with the exception of the Titan skating, like movement was a lot slower than any neutral game movement is today. We really only accelerated the game starting with like Go Fast, and then furthered it with Season of Dawn with Top Tree Dawn, and then Beyond Light with Cryo. So I think we've kind of, in the same way that we've pushed like abilities too far into the dominance of PvP, I also believe that movement is too far ahead in the dominance of PvP. Now, I'm gonna paint this with a big old like, there is no desire to go back to a world where we were at with D2 vanilla, where I think people very clearly told us like that shit's too slow, that shit's too stale. Like, but I do think there's a wide spectrum of movement to in combat, and we're like pretty hard on one end, and I bet you we could walk it back a few steps.
That was an awesome answer. I feel like Drew and I were like giving a little.
Are you satisfied, Merc?
Yeah,
relatively satisfied.
And like Kujay is like, speed is so fun. Yeah, that's like real, like 100%. Speed's super fun. So again, I think the challenge for the team is threading the needle of like what feels super fun and potent and awesome, but doesn't like run rampant and destabilizes the combat for everyone else.
We had a very detailed talk. We've been talking about this whole script that we're going through right now for a very long time, and so we went back and forth on the movement ability thing, because on one hand, you're like, dude, movement's fucking dope. Like, it's really cool to be Top Tree Dawnblade and like just zoom around the map, right? That's absolutely awesome. And like, there's a part of us that all loves playing like that. But then also there's the other side of that coin, right? Like the dark part, I guess, where it's like some people, hunters, if they want to have a good PvP loadout, a lot of them don't even have to think. Why even think about considering your loadout at all when you can just slap on stompies and then just jump around the map? And then, you know, Cammy, when he got a hold of Shatter Dive, it's like a whole goddamn new ball game. So now you can just...
It's glued to me. It's not even a choice anymore.
So now you can just jump around all willy-nilly like crazy, and you just dive down whenever you want. And it's like, it's trying to... I don't envy you, because it's trying to find that very happy medium of, well, we don't want the slowness of, you know, year 1 D2 vanilla, but we, you know, don't lock people in place, but we want to have the fun of like moving around. I just think for a lot of options right now, Merc, would you agree that like just a lot of things are potentially good to the point in PvP where you just don't even need to think about it. You just turn your brain off, and like it's just in terms of how strong movement is in the sandbox. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you talked earlier about like you have to balance the upside with the downside, and movement abilities right now at this current point in time are for the most part almost entirely upside, and there's very little trade-off. Now, obviously, hunter, you have to use an exotic and things like that, but it's not quite the same as it is like a grenade where you use it and now you have to wait 45 seconds potentially for another one.
Yeah, and like I'm gonna, because I see like, so like some of the chat going like, oh no, they're gonna slow it down. Like I think our mentality for Crowdclasm is probably like a picture of like where we'd want to go, where there's some resource or something you need to do to get that sweet movement. Because again, like we agree, movement feels fucking dope, but pure movement just as an accelerant in neutral, it becomes too dominant. And I'm gonna add like tracking people when they're doing some of these like crazy movement modes is super unfun, right? And there's that two-way street of what makes a shooter fun, which is like it's fun to like be in combat and fight other people and get shot at, and then it's also fun to shoot people. And some of those movement abilities make it really unfun to shoot people. So there has to be some mechanism for reining it in that doesn't destroy the feel of it.
Sure.
I want to add here that sometimes the speed feels too fast to where it's not a matter of skill of tracking a target. They straight just RNG rubber band back and forth like Titan melee type thing when they slide through the floor.
Oh, the Titan melee.
And so it's not like we're getting outskilled. It's we can't see you move.
I'm glad that we brought this up, because chat is lighting up right now.
Yeah,
and
sure.
and I knew we would get comments like this, but it's I love talking about it, but it's like, well, don't do that because hunters are, quote, the movement class. And it's like, this, well, you know, true. I mean, I'm not sure. Is that like in your, Kevin, in the identity of the hunter, the warlock, the titan, would you consider hunter the movement class? And like, would taking too much movement from the hunter be, you know, counterintuitive to what your design philosophy would be for the game?
No, because I don't think I don't think we're blanket taking anything away, right? I think it'd be like a resource cost, like even something as simple as adding that 4-second cooldown on the Shatter Dive, right? Like that immediately positions it as something that like it is helpful, it's useful, but it's not necessarily something that I can spam over and over again that becomes ultra dominant. In the same way that like Top Tree Dawn, to a lesser extent, like the 6-second cooldown on 2, like I think that's like probably still too strong, but like, yeah, we're not taking that movement away. So to align with you, to answer your question, like, yeah, I think there's consensus among the abilities team that the hunter is supposed to be the mobile class, in a bunch of ways that you haven't seen and probably will never see, like in prototypes. We tried to make that more true. We're certainly going to continue trying to make that more true, but the lens, like I said, like we constantly grow from the feedback. Like one of the things that we're going to grow from is that we're going to look at these movement abilities from the lens of being the victim, and being the victim for, you know, the 100,000th time, being the victim against 3 of these guys in trials, and that's probably going to lead us to add some sort of like some solution in there that makes it not as crazy as V1 Crowdclasm. I think V1 Crowdclasm is currently like the bar of like, yeah, it's too much.
That's fair.
you say mechanism, and like I thought of bottom tree striker with frontal assault. Like you need that melee, but for that 10 seconds, I feel unstoppable. Like that's why I run that class. I mean, reversal's good, knockout's good, but that frontal assault charged melee. So like I'll spec all into strength. You know, getting that mechanism, that melee off, just to feel that for 10 seconds and just be dominant.
Yeah, and I think that's an example right there of like what we want to do. Right, you made a choice, like you found a thing that was fucking cool, and then you made a choice in your build crafting to further it. Like, yep, that's 100% where we want to be.
And yeah, again, I think I was talking to Drew about this the other night, where it's like, yeah, we still want to have cool, dope movement in the game. It's not like, oh, they want to turn it into Halo 1, where, you know, everyone's just kind of walking around, even though that was a fucking great game. But like it phenomenal. It's more of like the give and take of like what Cammy just mentioned earlier, where you want the movement to be there for sure. You definitely want the movement to be there, but you want it to be, you know, within the realm of skillful, not to the degree of, how did you put it, Cammy? Like, don't like not.
You have to understand the realities of latency gaming. Just
Yep.
That's it.
There you go.
I mean, that's actually huge, because I think that is another lens that we're certainly looking through things more harshly, because yeah, like the context of the game, the way the game's being consumed isn't going to change. Like, we should not bet on somebody having like fucking amazing fiber internet to have a great time.
Yeah,
Fair.
I think with movement, it's like we all love zoom in. Like I might meme the movement skill gap every day, but like, you know, we love zoom in. We love when you build up momentum and are able to go from engagement to engagement, from problem to problem, and quickly like solve them. And when you build that momentum as a player, it feels really, really great. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of the movement abilities right now give you so much with so little cost, to the point where it's like making up for bad positioning. And it makes it so that like when you're caught in bad position, you can still get out of it relatively easy. I mean, I'm not a perfect player and I'm not going to pretend like I am, but half my builds actually just are like literally capitalizing on the things that fix my errors, that like get me like on the hunter. 6 Coyote, for example, is like doubling down on an ability that breaks aim assist, gets me back into cover, and makes up for my bad decision making and positioning. And realistically, I should be dying there, in my opinion. But I feel like the opportunity cost for some of these, or your cost to be able to fly through, bump your head off a ceiling with stompies at someone who's trying to primary you, you know, is just there's no or not very much opportunity cost, other than I can do it, so why don't I?
Right. And for what it's worth, I actually don't hate the, like, this is going to sound, somebody's going to clip this out of context, but telling you now, Twitch clips, don't do it.
Get ready.
Stop it.
Fuck it. I think it's actually pretty okay if there is a build, or if there is a fantasy that's like, yep, my guy's about getting out of bad positioning, and there's some resource attached to that, right? So it's like, even if you get to do it once every however many seconds, I think I'm okay with that, so long as you're either building to it or it's part of the identity of that class, right? Like, I could see a world where that's a thing that Night Stalker specializes in, and I'm totally comfortable with that. I'm not going to sit here and say that gameplay loop is wrong. I'm just saying that when it becomes the dominant gameplay loop, where you can do it without much investment, that's probably where we probably want to bring it back to the shop and do some work.
Cool. Can I just quickly point out, we had a huge goddamn shout out for Chris, who has been oh so patiently sitting here this whole time.
Chris, I mean, if you have things to add, please.
Chris could probably help with the next question.
I'm actually napping in the background. You can't tell.
He's got the Homer Simpson glasses with the eyeballs drawn on.
Same page with this stuff.
Yeah, Chris and I are like super aligned aesthetically on a bunch of this stuff. We're both like what I like to call children of Halo, but I don't think either of us are children anymore. But yeah, I think aesthetically we're both in line, so I don't think any of this is a surprise to him. We've talked about a lot of it.
We for those of you listening at home, and if you were joining us late on Twitch, if you might be confused, if you're listening at home, you're like, oh my god, there's another Bungie person on the show. We have Chris here for the upcoming weapon talk. We were trying to get Kevin's ability and super sandbox discussion done first, because Kevin might have to hop out shortly. But I think we're looking pretty damn good on time right now. Drew, I wanted to say thank you. You know, when you have that word on the tip of your tongue, or you have a thought on the tip of your brain, the cost Thank you. It's not that I have a problem with hunters flying into a room like Sonic the goddamn Hedgehog and just kind of like, you know, when they can like they bounce off the ceiling and like a, you know, they're using stompies to bounce, they're literally slamming their heads off low ceilings to like gain momentum. That's not to me what, you know, potentially bugs me, but it's just like for having really dope builds, I think there's like a degree of like there should be a cost. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like, I love that you used that word because I'm trying to think of other examples of like what good reward you could have in the game, PvP or PvE, but it requires a cost. Like Breach and Clear, right? Like Breach and Clear, the armor mod, super cracked armor mod for PvE. A lot of people love it. It's like that son of a bitch is 9 costs. You know what I mean? Like you have to really. Like if you're gonna put on Breach and Clear, I mean people put it on without thinking anyway, but maybe you have to pause and think about your overall build potential. I like the cost factor.
I think here's a good example of like good cost in the video game, which is like anyone who tries to snipe in PvP right now and wants to use armor mods knows exactly what I'm about to say, which is, my God, if you try to put any sniper mod on right now, you are devastated. It is ruined your capabilities. At which point you're just kind of like, yep, I'm sniping. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm capable of doing. But I think that's good, right? Because then the trade-off is I'm not taking, I rarely take hand cannon targeter because that competes for that. And that makes sense, right? Like, God forbid we live in a world where I could roll in with sniper targeting and hand cannon targeting, plus all of my recov mods or my dex mods. That would be a nightmare, I'm sure.
You should see Drew.
I was gonna say, well, no, I was gonna say, in terms of trade-off, like I take double targeting, double unflinching when I'm sniping, and I guess the most associate, me as a sniper player, and my chest piece and my helmet are for nothing but unflinching and targeting.
Yep.
And I guess that's the cost, right?
That is the cost, yeah.
I think there's something interesting here which comes into weapon design as well, where we're okay with the player having a moment of extreme power, but if it's unearned, it's kind of boring, and it's very hard to balance as well.
Unearned. Yeah, I
So
guess
be
that would
clear,
make sense.
Very much agree.
I'm super here for someone to do the thing. Yeah, to key off Chris. Sorry to interrupt you. But I wanted to double down on this because it's super important to paint the picture. If you build a thing or you're doing the execution, you build up the stacks of roaring flames, whatever it is, I'm totally fine with you being a mini god for a short amount of time because you've done the work. You've earned it.
So is the key that you talk about that trying to strike a balance between like anime and then like actual like realistic, okay, like this is good for the game. So is the key then that like you can have the anime, but you gotta earn it. You gotta do something to get the anime.
I mean, Krillin has to die for you to
mode.
go Super Saiyan. Yeah.
Oh, that is
100%.
such a brutal goddamn example that you just threw out. I hate that I like that so much.
Yep.
It's gonna stay with me for a while.
Chris, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to talk a little bit about Hawkmoon as being an example of this on the weapon side, right? Like in Destiny 1, you would occasionally just get a completely unearned one-shot kill. And recognizing not everyone loves the new version of Hawkmoon, but the idea was, yeah, you can occasionally get that one-shot kill, but you better be damn skilled to do it.
Yeah.
And you only get one of them every so often. That's kind of
Picture.
the bar.
That's a good example,
the
yeah, from the
Hawkmoon
weapon.
I
stack.
love that.
Raiju pop,
I love
someone
that.
else pops a super, Raiju cancel, then just bang them out Hawkmoon, one tap. It's hilarious.
Oh, Cammy. We're getting kind of to the bottom of our Kevin bucket here.
Is Merc content with those movement questions?
Yeah, that was about as good.
Yeah.
as
All right. I have a
could.
miscellaneous question.
Yeah.
And so this is perfect class representation, aka 33% of each of them use Titan Hunter Warlock, an overall design goal. Like if you see a Iron Banner, is it a design goal to see 33% across the board with the win rates?
I think, like, if you ask me just in general, like, yeah, that'd be fucking rad. But I think the reality is it's going to be near impossible to compete with that because I don't think there's anything we could do on the mechanics front to still create that balance just because of the aesthetic alone. There are people who will run a class, even if it's like painfully suboptimal, because that fantasy or that mechanical fantasy or the feel of it speaks to them. So I think we want to get as close as possible, I think, to like, hey, no class left behind, or at very least that each class has a place where they shine the most, right? Because like, let's be
That's a
real.
good way of putting it.
Well of Radiance is not going to be strong in like 80% of PvP activities, but there's a world where it's really great at this is like
Someone
a
wants to
terrible
be a
example,
healer.
but like, well, yeah, I mean, yes, but that's like pretty. I feel like that's really hard to do right now, and like that's an example of like the effort not justifying the benefit, like in PvP specifically. I feel like you should, if you're healing in PvP, there needs to be like better rewards there for you, because you're biting the bullet for everybody else. But it like, let's say they're like in I was gonna say Countdown, but like Countdown would be a great example where Well of Radiance would be really strong, right? Because you could plant it right on the bomb. Right, and so you're sitting there with the and you're basically forcing them to burn a super effect or wait it out to deal with you. And I'm pretty sure that with most, well, like if we're using Countdown from before Beyond Light, you would outlast the fuse time. Yeah, pretty convinced of that. So.
Yeah, used to throw Sunbracer nades at that. Yeah, I asked that question because it seems like hunters are the popular option, and I'm wondering if it's designed to like, yeah, we know people are going to play hunter no matter how strong we make Titan or Warlock.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Hunters is one of those situations where it's like people love their capes, people love that fantasy, they love the lone wolf fantasy. Like, I'm convinced that we could make Hunters subpar and people would still run them. We're not gonna, to be clear, but we probably could.
Okay,
because
perfect.
that identity is so strong. Right, like you are your character, you are your class in a lot of ways.
Let's see here, definitely a good answer. Man, I guess we didn't pack on enough for the ability questions.
I'm also down to just chat. So like I'm here for a little bit longer. So
sure, yeah.
If we can wrap up the ability section, and I'm still here to hang out while you guys talk to Chris.
That sounds good to me. If you feel like you want to tap out at any time, you can. I'm
kind of interested in touching the general transition questions.
We're gonna hit those right now.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. So let's see what we got here. How do your teams, and this is for both Kevin and Chris, how do your teams approach the balance of lethality versus ease of use in weapons and abilities? Like the balance of lethality versus ease of use.
I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna let Chris start, and then I'll do my spiel.
I think there's got to be a risk-reward element to this. So this is, for example, why scout rifles aren't meta in Destiny 2, and why it's very hard to really push them in that direction, because the risk just isn't there, right? So amount of risk, which directly translates into range and available resources, whether that's like special ammo or whatever.
Yeah, for us, this one's a tough one because we have to service the entire spectrum of players, and again, as I mentioned before, like your character is your class in a lot of ways. I think people identify their character particularly somewhat as some of the subclass they run. I know I do. Like I'm a Voidwalker at heart, but yeah. So I think Stasis is an example of maybe like where we like overcorrected a little too much. Because we wanted it to feel powerful for everyone, and that is certainly the goal. I'm not saying that isn't the goal, but there's definitely different implementations of hitting that goal. So I think in general, we would like high potency things, specifically in PvP, to require some amount of effort, some amount of setup, but in some cases they don't necessarily need that. In some cases, like shoulder charge, right? So shoulder charge is extremely potent. We don't put the effort there in the skill. We put it in the like situation of being up close, which is super lethal for you in PvP, and then we attach cooldown to it, right? So there's a resource cost to it. But yeah, like I think weighted throwing knife is a good example of the opposite end of that spectrum, which is like we built this wind up in, we turned down some of the tracking to make it a thing that felt like you had to have more intent to use it. And in some cases, that's not going to be compatible with all player skills, and that's okay. The goal there is to make it just abundantly clear when you're opting into a subclass that is one of those like more effort required subclasses. Like Top Tree Dawn is an example of something that we built, and in dev, like we got a bunch of feedback that it was like, hey, this is really complicated. This is pretty hard. The combinatorics is the word we like to use, is like extremely high. Are you sure you want to do this? And I'm like, yep, this is the high skill class. Like, this is the class for people who know how to put it together. I think, however, that is a dangerous Kool-Aid to drink, and sometimes you can go too far. I'm gonna take full ownership of that. I'm gonna beat that over the head. Like, top tree Dawn was definitely, is still too spicy, but it was a thing that was meant for the high school players, and I'm like actually extremely pleased with how people are using it. I think like it was really rad to see Drew combine it with the changes we made to Wings of Sacred Dawn to add to carry that momentum drift and use Chappie and get the DR. That was like one of the coolest things to see when it shipped. I'm like a big fan of watching how Riot uses it to move around the map and maneuver. That's like fucking rad. Celestial Fire. Anytime I see anyone use it to like splash somebody around a piece of cover, I'm like, or hook somebody, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we wanted you to do with it. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's to answer the question, like, I think using the new lenses that we've kind of like refined over the course of Stasis will probably do more of the like potency, require some effort similar to weighted throwing knife, or I think where we're going to end up with Penumbral Blast. Hopefully that's the intent. Versus like Shuriken, which like Withering Blade is super strong for super low effort, and it like auto homes on you. Like, that is an example of something we went too far. And the new implementation of it, right, like the version you'll see tomorrow, is like super weak damage for a moderate slow, and it's still pretty easy to use, right? But that makes sense, right? The ease of use is now countered with the lower potency. And then PvE, that's a completely different beast, because I think Withering Blade will be great. Weighted throwing knife is an example probably where it's too hard in PvE, but like we could fix it.
I don't know if you've seen this is super random tangent, but we gotta have one every other week, right? There's a documentary with the making of Star Wars Episode 1, where they are doing behind the scenes stuff where they
Lucas going, I think I've gone too far.
Oh, Kevin, my respect for you just went up so high.
I've
about
seen
the
all
shuriken.
Of these things.
I may have gone a little too far in a few places. Just like talking about the power of the Hunter Shuriken. That was a very, very, very fleshed out answer. I appreciate that. This next question, I am super interested in hearing the answer to, and I would love to start off with Chris. And we know that Chris, you've been at Bungie since late 2019, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So, still, I want to know, what are your top 3 Sandbox regrets in the history of Destiny?
Chris first.
Take your time. go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I'm just going to add one thing onto Kevin's previous answer first.
Oh, okay, sure.
Kevin, in cold blood, used the phrase dangerous Kool-Aid, and I really hope someone clipped that.
Oh, god damn it.
The old danger Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Like a shader in Destiny. Danger Kool-Aid.
Talk about weapons.
Oh, I like that.
That's a weapon name somewhere. I don't think we can use Kool-Aid, but
put it in there.
There's something there.
I feel like double primary was an overcorrection. And I wasn't here for this. And like, again, as Kevin said, all respect to the Sandbox team who was here to ship the game. It was in direct response to a ton of feedback that pushed in that direction. But I think it made the game too flat. And like, honestly, increased the skill gap a bit too much. Number one.
That's an interesting answer. Yeah.
To really build up a lot of regrets about Destiny. I'll let Kevin take a shot.
Yeah. Oh man. Oof. I'm not gonna like hone this in on Sandbox, because I've worked on many things over my time on Destiny. But I'll give you like my top 3. Like, oof, maybe shouldn't have.
Okay,
definitely. Sure. Like one of the higher ones is the approach on D2 vanilla. Like, to Chris's point, I was on the PvP team when we did that, and that was a direct reaction to a lot of the feedback we got, especially at the end of Rise of Iron, about how people wanted more primary gunfights, Trials of Osiris being like the thing that we should shoot for as the core PvP experience. Like, we tried really, really, really hard to embellish that experience, and fix a bunch of the problems that people were experiencing Trials. Like, Countdown is a direct result of that, right? Like, it's elimination with a reason to fight somebody, which is the the problem with Eden, right? Like you don't have a reason to fight somebody for a long time. That said, yeah, I think we went too far. There's a version of the game that we made, especially around the like Go Fast update, that's like probably cool, but like not for Destiny. Luke likes to call it a good execution on the wrong plan, because the game we made, I think, was fundamentally not the Destiny that people fell in love with. I think if I'm gonna keep going down that train,
Keep going,
there's
baby.
definitely some pain on the ranking system, because that was another one of those that I was involved in, and I think specifically it was attaching this pursuit to that was straight up power in PvP to a hard skill gate. And like, I don't know if you guys remember, but that first iteration of the ranking system, that Claymore was a lot. 2100 was a lot.
That was a lot.
And it was in one of the most, I think, competitive sandboxes we had ever made, because it was no radar, countdown survival, 4v4, and you had to like overwhelmingly win your games. There were no glory rank floors. There were loss streaks. Like I had when we were building it, I had this vision in my head of like it has to be as hardcore as the League of Legends ranking system, and it was definitely way too much. Like we looked at the numbers, like 8,000 people got Claymore, and that's like, a fraction of a fraction for Destiny players.
And I have 1,000 of them.
Drew, don't think I didn't see you smirking over there when he's talking about the.
I loved it.
Well, look,
Yeah,
Cam and Drew and I, like we would go and just play with friends and get Claymores. Like that was the thing we did in season 3. That was like our pastime. So it makes sense.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I got
You got one more?
Mad respect so far for those answers.
Much
That was
respect,
great
yeah.
to hear.
Yeah, these are really
Thanks.
good.
Keep it coming.
Gosh, I think I mean, this is like a more recent one, but like, yeah, again, I'm not going to phrase this as a regret. None of these are regrets, but they're like lessons learned. Like, oops, the stove is hot. Don't touch it next time. I think
I like
definitely not paying attention as much and as rigorously as we could have to CC in Destiny. Like, I think there's definitely this fantasy we had in our head that was a counter to the unbridled aggression would be welcome. And I think we over-indexed on that to a point where we probably, we drank from the dark a little too much. And maybe we needed the clairvoyance and or the clarity to take a step back. And that isn't to say nobody didn't, but it was, we believed enough in the North Star that we just kept pushing through.
Well, we've talked about that exact effect of how stasis was used to counter aggression on this podcast now. And we were, of course, in agreement that we were like, yeah, I mean, it obviously went to a level that it probably didn't necessarily need to go to. But we talked about in the very beginning, it was like this, when it's not being brutally abused, it's like a nice change of pace. Like, it's nice to be able to punish someone who makes an aggressive rush without a lot of forethought. Like, it forces people to play a more deterministic style of gameplay to counter it. But of course, the ease of use of stasis was so incredibly,
Too high.
Yeah, it was so easy that it took a lot of the gambles that you had to make and just like kind of wiped them out, and it was like shurikens are the problem, they're the solution to every problem.
And
it's like that.
Like it's super hard. And I'm not saying this to like, oh no, feel like, oh, have remorse. Like, hell no. Like, who cares if it's hard? It's always hard. The hard part was specifically like, we're making a new damage type, so it's a new core part of that identity. It's going to fit against all skill levels. Like, how do you balance the needle of saying, hey, this is a high skill thing, but it's for everyone, and it's and there's so many limited abilities, especially at launch, right? On season 12, right, like all you were going to have was Penumbral Blast, and not even Freeze Rift or Ice Flare Bolts yet. So there was definitely some plate spinning that, like, let's be real here, some of the plates are on the floor and broken. That we had to do there.
That's fair. For those of you listening at home, I think CC was mentioned. Crowd control. Just putting
Yes,
there we
Yeah, not Cammy Cakes or CC Coon.
Cammy Cakes, yeah. Okay, that was good answers there. And now we can move on to the other side of the coin of that question, which, we got to be fair here. So, what are your top 3 sandbox triumphs that you're very proud of?
Chris, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've only been at Bungie for like 18 months, but there are a couple of exploratory things that I tried, which ended up turning out pretty well. That's maybe not the most popular opinion, but adept weapons, I think. I was getting a ton of internal feedback that, man, these need to be way, way stronger, they need to be way stronger, or they have to be purely cosmetic because otherwise there'll be so much grief from players who aren't able to acquire them. And I think like they're not necessarily a super exciting thing, but I think we struck a reasonable balance between desirability and not feeling like you're getting pooped on with nowhere to respond.
That's fair.
Yeah, that mods help a lot with that, I think, too. I don't know how much you had to do with that specifically, but like the ability to slot different mods into a gun like completely opens up a whole new world of possibilities with the depth weapons, and not in a game breaking way, but in like a fun build crafting way. So.
Yeah.
And the +2s are a great touch too. We masterwork.
We're stat fanatics here. We will talk about that on the show and be like, this gets exactly 70. And so when you're in this specific situation, it's 100.
Yeah, nobody here knows how this show's gonna like go once we really start talking to Chris and the numbers start to come out, because we've been like talking with Kevin about subclasses and stuff like that. And the weapons part's gonna hit, and it's gonna be like numbers, like spreadsheets in visual form. So.
You have more there, Chris?
Why don't we go turnabout? You go next. I will think of another one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is my last main part, and then it's all you. It's all Chris all the time. Man. I mean, this is like a weird one because I just said there was part of it we regretted, but like stasis. It successfully added a 4th damage type to the game. We like opened up the ancient texts and like we drank deep and we learned, and we were able to do this thing with a team that again wasn't there for the original incarnation of Arc Solar Void. Right, this is mostly new people working on it, and I feel like we made a thing that stands up to the three main characters. Like a successful 4th character has joined the cast, and he doesn't look like he was animated by a different studio. Sorry, I keep drawing the anime reference a lot. So that I think that's a big success. Conversely, like in the same vein, like I think all the like updates we made to the ranking system were like super great, like adding glory rank floors, making Luna's Howl a lot easier to get for people. I think the eventual incarnation of the pinnacle weapons and the quests were a lot better, and it was like a reason to grind. I'm like particularly proud, I think, of Not Forgotten, because it was a thing that like we managed to keep secret and no one knew about it until it popped. And it was like a thing that people like they when it popped, they're like, "What's this? I don't know what this is." And it dropped, and it's fucking dope. Like to speak bluntly about it, it's fucking dope. It was pretty proud of that. And I think the final thing, weirdly enough, is I was pretty proud of. This is like when I was like a baby designer when I first joined the PvP team, but like one of the first things I got to build from scratch was Rift. And Lars and Andrew trusted me to build it, and we built the thing. And I remember standing at E3 at the Rift booth. I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, how did this even happen? Because at the time I'm still I'm still very young at the company, probably like 2 years in. So I remember that very vividly.
I know I said earlier that we were going to let Bungie talk a lot and not jump in. Can we fucking bring back Rift? That was really dope. What happened to that?
Dude, Rift's great.
I'm gonna dive in, dude. What happened? Where's my goddamn Rift, dude?
There's a pause button here.
Who took that away?
Chris and I can't speak to that. We make Sandbox.
Damn it.
You know, there's this really cool guy. When we open the show, he's like, "Yeah, the show's about Sandbox."
Yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, we almost got him, Chad. We almost
really
got him.
Cool, man.
Yeah, no, it's
just in general, that whole
answers,
answer, right, of the regrets and triumphs. I think everybody in the Twitch chat applause for the two developers, because that was a huge insight.
Yeah, no, it is. We appreciate the openness, because I mean, hey, we're all human, man. Like I call Cool Guy and we talk on the phone about when I have a great YouTube video, and I call him and I'm like, I really fucked up with that YouTube video, and he's like, we've all been there, man. You're
I
human.
think a universal truth about creators is that we don't actually know what the fuck we're doing day one, but we constantly add to the toolbox and we're constantly learning from our experiences. Like a good creative isn't someone who gets it right all the time. It's the person who does a thing and then learns from it.
There you go.
The wise words right there, man.
Chad, I hope you're happy. Dylan is yelling at me in the chat. We said
Bungie, make that a
Sandbox.
weapon text, a flavor text, right?
He's
Exact
yelling at
quote.
me. I'm sorry, all right? Dylan, I liked Rift, okay? And SRL too, but I'm not gonna have Cosmo break through the window and tackle me, all right? But anyway, all right. good answers. Chris, any more triumphs that you have that you would, take a little time to talk here about what you're proud of in the team or anything like that. Anything under that umbrella.
Well, someone came to me with a crazy idea for a weapon back when we were starting Season 13 development. Said, hey, I really, really want a Tex Mechanica rifle. And I really wanted to make a sniper rifle, but such low uptime. And if you're going to do a Tex Mechanica gun, it's got to have super high uptime. But am I really going to make a scout rifle when scout rifles just aren't that strong right now? And man, that thing turned out really well. It's a little bit hot, and it is getting pulled back later this season. But man, that turned out well. We had such a great team working on it as well. Like we had an amazing concept artist who nailed the Tex Mechanica aesthetic. We had a 3D modeler maker who directly contributed to a bunch of elements of the weapon. So originally it had a reticle, right? Like an M down sights reticle, and she really, really wanted to try making it with pure iron sights, and that it adds so much to the aesthetic of the weapon. And then we had an animator, if you're watching, I love you, who was just so down for watching all of this crazy rabbit hole of YouTube double reloading videos that we've been sharing between each other. I don't know if anyone noticed. If you really, really watch the reload, you actually pick up 2 shells and load them in at once, and all of this sort of stuff. Yeah, it all just flowed out of that lever action idea, where it feels pretty great, and the hand motion when you're watching a clip of the anim looks amazing, but shit, you can't really see it when you're aiming down sights. Well, I guess we better make it fucking awesome in hipfire then, and just so it goes, and that's how it ended up where it was. But yeah, I was really pleased with how that weapon turned out, and particularly with the Presage mission, which is just such a perfect way to get the weapon. That was pretty great.
That's a good story. I'll tell you, if your mission going in was being let's make a unique scout rifle that'll make a splash, check
Nailed
that
it.
box. This mission goddamn accomplished. I know that a lot of people in the community are, they go back and forth on DMT. On one end of the spectrum, man, I love deleting people with hipfire. That is just what a mwah, feeling is perfect. But then on the other end of the spectrum, it's you push into an enemy spawn with with Behemoth Titan, which again right now, Wednesday, June 2nd, not yet nerfed to the Thursday patch, and you get immediately vaporized by a Vorpal DMT, and you're like, damn. Maybe they need to look at that gun a little bit. But it made a splash. That's for sure.
Not for Bungie to pat itself on its own back, but Chris knows that's my favorite fucking gun, in the game by far. It mechanically, I think it speaks to the Halo nerd in me, right? It is effectively the DMR.
It's the
I
DMR.
fucking love it.
Yeah.
I hipfire gameplay that speaks to me. It's near and dear to my heart. I actually do have to bow out, so I think this is Chris time. So here you go, Chris.
Kevin,
Thank you so much.
thank
Kevin.
you so much for joining us on the
Thank you, man.
show. We really do appreciate you. Round of applause, everybody. Kevin, and in the Twitch chat live, please. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the transparency and the discussion. We'd love to have you back anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. I like being here. It was really fun. Again, I really want to stress that the guys working on Sandbox are definitely cut from the same cloth. We're all playing the game. So even if you find us in the tower, or we're on some of your friends list, don't be shy. Just shoot us an invite. We're probably more likely to play than not. I hope I didn't mess up your layout by leaving, but I love you. Godspeed.
Oh,
Through Excel. Go,
yeah.
go, go.
No, it'll be
Awesome.
fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Wonderfully.
Be good.
Later, Gators.
All right.
Later,
Catch you
guys.
later.
Peace.
Later.
Oh
But-
God, it's all ruined.
Drew, bring in the all.
It's fine.
Hey,
It's
hey,
going
Chris.
to be fine.
you were walking through the concept there. It's like, oh, I want to make a scout rifle. Was the original vision always a 120 for DMT? Because that's
No.
really special.
Yeah, it ended up in a pretty interesting place. It actually, a bunch of the constraints of the weapon just naturally led to what it ended up being. And firstly, just to what Kevin said just before he left, like it being a DMR, it's not really a coincidence. Like before working at Bungie, I worked at 343 Industries, shipped a couple of Halo games, but I always loved Fire and Halo felt, and Dead Man's Tale is a little bit of a harking back to my weapon design roots there. But yeah, so why 120? Basically, I wanted it to speed up firing under certain circumstances, and initially it was just like, oh, as you land headshots, it just fires faster and faster, but you really couldn't tell. And so I asked the animator, what's the fastest you could possibly play this without it starting to look goofy? And he said it's like 150 RPM. And so I decided to work back from there, set the base fire rate as 120, and then the increased fire rate with the trigger as hip fire as 140. We also knew that 120 hand cannons were going to be pretty hot. We didn't expect that they were going to blow up quite to the extent that they did, but it's kind of nice having a weapon that can play in that sandbox and still feel cool.
So fantastic, and I know you probably can't speak to this specifically, but I think it plays very, very different on the two different control schemes. Obviously, I think mouse and keyboard plays entirely differently than it does on controller. Without going into specifics, is the balance patch that's coming later, if it's already determined, is that something that's going to be universal, or is it going to be control specific, kind of like the last word patch was?
So it's not input method specific, so it's not like we're doing custom mouse and keyboard tuning or anything, but the way the nerf is structured means it will affect controller users less. And I can't drop specific numbers. I think we're going to do a TWAB talking about the next big set of changes. But yeah, it's also the way the change is set up. It ought to feel pretty much the same. It'll just be less oppressive.
I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this or go into it, but is there a reason that that it would feel like Last Word and DMT are the two best representative candidates for this question? Is like, why do some weapons feel like people attribute Last Word on controller feeling really good, and like DMT hipfire less good on controller, or like Last Word hipfire being less good on MNK, and then DMT hipfire being less good on controller, and then like way better on MNK? Like, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about that, but what might lead to that?
So the Last Word actually does have like mouse and keyboard specific tuning.
Cool.
Dead Man's Tale doesn't. In Dead Man's Tale's case, it's just an artifact of like how the game assist and recoil and everything lines up, and that recoil reduction that you get for free using mouse and keyboard. Yeah, there isn't anything custom about it.
Cool.
I definitely didn't spend the last 5 minutes tweaking the live overlay. Where are we in the docket?
We are.
We haven't even started. We're still
we
on
haven't
Dead Man's Tale.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
ready to go.
Terrific.
And if you want a tangent, I can tangent because
Yeah,
I was
we
playing
can
that. Okay, never
tangent
mind.
with the best of them. I'll tell you a story of Fallout. All right, Drew, why don't you take it away here with the weapon
Sure.
questions?
So, a big one for me is asking, what is your vision for special weapon balance? Like, how do you feel about current special weapon balance? How do you feel about like moving forward for as much as you can talk about?
Yeah, I think so. Shotguns are super dominant at the moment, like everyone knows that. So shocking, yeah. Just to speak a little bit to why we hit snipers first, though. There's been a bunch of questions about that. It's that snipers, if they're strong, feel way more oppressive. Like there's nothing you can do against a sniper who's laning. You can't instantly close the gap, or at least you can back away from someone with a shotgun. But anyway, yeah, shotgun's way too strong. I think, though, that getting special ammo is a moment of power for players, and so it's important that each special weapon have the capability to do a one-hit kill, except for trace rifles. I guess, unless I'm missing something else. So I just started thinking about all of the special exotics. Never mind. Yeah, so for example, shotguns, if you're at point blank range and you're aiming reasonably well, you should be able to get that one hit kill. With snipers, if your aim is true and you're not like actively under fire, because flinch, you should be able to get that kill. I view grenade launchers as kind of a skill shot, like going back to Halo Reach Pro Pipe days. Like they should be hard to use but rewarding kind of utility weapons. And they have the potential to one-hit kill, but they're pretty hard to use, and I think that the usage rates bear that out. Fusion rifles, I think, are again like a bit more of a skillful option, like a mid-range one-hit kill, but requiring pre-charging. Like you can't just charge out in the open, or you're definitely dead. And so I think there's like stuff that we need to shift around for all of those, but I think that the pieces are there to make them play pretty well against each other, at least.
I'm going to jump in very quickly. Regarding the usage of grenade launchers, if I were to, it's interesting that you brought up the Reach grenade launcher, because I really enjoyed Reach, some of it, but I would consider the Reach Pro Pipe very challenging to use. What was it? I'm trying to think. If you were to compare the Reach Pro Pipe with a lot of grenade launchers in D2, I would think that grenade launchers are currently far easier to use effectively in PvP, particularly in maybe hot swapping them into another weapon for a finishing move like the DMT or something like that. I don't think this is something that you can answer, but I was wondering if, because I know you guys at Bungie are looking at the data from every angle, right? You're looking at it from every angle. Is there an angle where we're looking at it from like a grenade launcher? How many people are using them, not maybe to get kills on their own, but sort of as like a setup weapon, like a primer? Is that kind of being looked at under the microscope?
Yeah, that's something that we're definitely aware of, like either using it to prime an enemy or using it to get cleanup kills and that kind of thing. Something that we're keeping an eye on, and like as you point out, we look at usage data, but we also look at community sentiment and whatnot.
Sure.
Just as an example, like Arbalest never showed a big spike in usage. It was always sort of low to middling kind of thing, but it was so unpleasant to play against that we came in and gave it a bit of a knock anyway. So I expect if grenade launchers end up in that place that we'll take a look. I don't think they're there right now. Like the number of people using them just is pretty low.
So it actually kind of ties into the question I was going to ask specifically at the end of this section, but since you just talked about it, I hope you don't mind if I just kind of kick it up there so you don't bounce back to it later. But I was going to ask, like, how do you focus on balancing special weapons that have low usage but are considered overpowered by a very specific section of the community with anime profile pictures, like Bastion, like Arentil was at some point? Like those things have never come to half of the usage that shotguns have, but at the same time a very vocal portion of the community says this is horrendous to play against, right? So I mean, I guess how do you weight those two different things where it's like this has low usage but people are really, really angry about it?
So in my view, people with anime profile pictures are universally intelligent, good at games, calm and rational. So when they talk, I immediately get to work. It's very important.
This sounds like a good idea.
Yes, you can.
But yeah, more seriously, I think like if there is a lot of sentiment around something being unpleasant to play against, even if the usage data doesn't reflect or doesn't suggest that there's a problem necessarily, it is important to take that seriously and like try it out locally, see what's going on, and like make adjustments if it's reasonable.
Is
So,
there? Oh, I'm sorry, Omar. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so like for example, grenade launchers, I think the base model of a special grenade launcher is still very similar to the Halo Reach grenade launcher. But there are perks that you can obviously put on top of these grenade launchers, like Croc's Dead and like Slide Shot now is a perk that's on the grenade launcher. And those dramatically change kind of, they alleviate some of the downside of grenade launchers to use. So if there is something specific like backup plan was one that was on fusion rifles, right? So you guys are looking at that stuff too. If people are complaining specifically about fusions, you're like, okay, well, let's narrow it down. Okay, 98% of fusions are being used with this perk, or like 98% of grenade launchers are being used with this perk. You guys are doing stuff like that as well, correct?
Yeah, exactly. We have like pretty good data on like usage rates for all perks in the sandbox. So just as an example, like I personally put slide shot on ignition code, and I have one or two
Oh.
regrets on that count, maybe. But like that's the kind of thing where if we see that there's like a big spike in usage with that particular perk, that's for sure something that we'd look at. Either like we do have the ability to replace perks on a weapon, we prefer not to because it's a risky thing to do because it modifies players' existing inventory. If it goes wrong, it's really bad. But we could like touch the perk. We could like make changes to the weapon if need be.
I find it very interesting that when you mentioned the Arbalist, you were like, well, we looked at the numbers and not a lot of people, like it wasn't an overused, I think by your definition, weapon, but you mentioned it was such a pain point to fight against that it was just like, well, we should do something about it. So it's almost, are there multiple meters? Like there's an obnoxious meter? Like you're like measuring how potentially upsetting or disruptive a weapon can be for the player experience in the sandbox? Because that is interesting. I think that might end up, if I had to predict, if I were a betting man, maybe down the line with grenade launchers. Because if I mean, I totally believe you if you're telling me that the numbers on the grenade launcher usage in PvP is low, but from the people I talk to, it is definitely a pain point, I will say.
Yeah, and it is like we obviously do look at usage as a way to point out where there might be a problem. That's not the only way, well, not the only measuring tool that we have. Like we have sentiment, we have our own experiences, whatnot. I will also say that it varies a ton depending on who you're playing against, what playlist you're in, what mode it is, and everything. So things that are fine across Crucible in general can be super, super toxic in trials, for example. Or if you're playing like high skilled, like a glory playlist, something like that. Certain tactics just become nastier and nastier when you're on the receiving end of a really high skilled player. So yeah, there's multiple axes to look at.
Interesting. I'm sorry for that tangent. Drew, continue.
Yeah, no worries. So we kind of generally touched on special weapons, but I wanted to know, and I think this is another hot question, what are your thoughts on the relative strength of special weapons, not in relation to each other, but in relation to primary weapons?
So I think certain special weapons are still too easy to use. Like I've said, basically they all have to have the potential to be one-shot kills. But yeah, their ease of use is a bit too high compared to primaries. Like you don't have much counterplay. I think also, like they are supposed to have very rigidly defined roles. Like outside of this situation, a shotgun is the wrong tool, and primaries are way more flexible and should get the win otherwise. We're not there right now. I think also like special ammo is just bountiful. Like it's so easy to just run a special weapon as a primary and not have to pay any particular cost for it. So like we're definitely looking at that pretty soon. In like, small ways earlier on and larger ways further out, I think. But yeah, it's a combination of how like the current uptime of special weapons, and that they're not constrained enough to we want them in.
Yeah, I mean, as someone that used to quite literally only run 2 special weapons after Forsaken because of the ammo economy, and it hasn't changed, I totally agree. What do you think of the relative strength, though, of primary weapons towards other primary weapons right now?
Are you talking like general weapon rolls that we intend, or like current strength in the sandbox?
I want to say current strength in the sandbox.
Yeah, 120s are way too hot. I actually think in general, primaries are reasonably well balanced against each other, and the ones that are really niche for a reason, which we're okay with. Like sidearms, I don't think it's possible to buff sidearms without breaking something. Like they're super, super strong inside their ideal range, and we don't want to extend that range. We don't want to make them even stronger. So like they're niche, and it's okay for them to be niche. Scout rifles, if we buff them too much, everything suddenly becomes long range and you can't stick your head out. And I think there's room to improve on all of this stuff, but I wouldn't see a huge buff. And I think most of the other weapons are okay, like once we bring 120s down. Although I have some concern that if we bring 120s down, 140s might just get king made. We'll have to see how that plays out. But like pulse rifles, I think are in an okay place. Auto rifles are a little bit down from where I want them to be. SMGs are basically exactly where I want them. Yeah, bows are again just super niche and like it's hard to meaningfully buff them.
Okay, I know we have some specific questions about primary balancing that I wanted to hand off to Merc.
Yeah. Since we're on the subject of it, and you were talking about how right now the special weapons are kind of overreaching from where they're supposed to be. Has there, and this is something that particularly went around the community a lot in the last couple of days, but has there been any thought given to increasing ease of use on primary weapons without necessarily touching the optimal time to kill? So that would be things like bringing up the body shot time to kill to decrease the critical hit ratios needed for optimal time to kill. Things like increasing, kind of like what you did to SMGs that put them in a great spot on controller, where you kind of tweaked the stability a little bit to make it a little bit easier to control. Has there been any thought given to doing stuff like that as a way to kind of alleviate the overutilization of special weapons without nerfing special weapons?
Yeah, we've talked about this occasionally. Where my head goes to when you first say ease of use is aim assist, and I definitely don't want to increase the aim assist on like any weapons, basically. But I can see where you're coming from, but I feel like the safer way to make a change is to bring special weapons down a bit in usability. Plus, like, if someone with a shotgun can kill you from 8 meters out, does it really matter that you have a higher body shot or a faster body shot TDK with your SMG or something? I don't know. Like, I think special weapons need to change first, and then we should look at primaries.
The original version of that question actually had an addendum that was like, even if it comes at the cost of reducing something like aim assist, and then we like pulled that out because we were like, no, it's too much of a question, like it's too much of one thing. But I'm personally of the belief that aim assist is extraordinarily generous in the game. We're definitely going to get to aim assist in a little bit here later, so we'll talk on that. But I mean, my point is just things like scout rifles, right? Like you said that, especially because they're slow rate of fire, if you increase the optimal TTK, like they immediately become oppressive, and there's nothing you can do about it. We've had scout metas in the past, and they're certainly not very much fun. Probably, in my opinion, one of the least fun primary metas we can have. But when you do things like bump their body shot damage up, it kind of just makes them a little bit more forgiving without necessarily making them a little bit more powerful. That doesn't work across the board for all weapons, but that was just one specific example that I kind of had in mind.
Yeah, and I think like that point is totally fair for scout rifles. Like I absolutely don't want there to ever be another scout rifle meta, just because it is that oppressive. But that's not to say that scout rifles couldn't use and won't get some adjustment. And like something along those lines where like we've tossed around, maybe scout rifles receive less flinch, or yeah, we increase the body shot damage, or we, you know, make other sort of adjustments of that type, which makes them a little easier to use against other primaries. It's an option. Yeah.
Very cool.
Cam, do you want to jump onto your question there?
Sure. All right. This is another anime profile picture-esque question, but here we go. Icarus mod appears to be the most dominant mod for most PvP weapons, by far. What are your thoughts on aerial accuracy in the game?
So I play the game a lot, and man, it really sucks when my guns don't shoot straight. So I feel the pain, but at the same time, I think that it's super dangerous to encourage aerial gameplay. Like, it increases, like, to Drew's point, like movement skill gap, right? It's something that you don't want to mess with too much. I think though that there's probably a world where we could make you build craft super heavily into it, and so it costs you something else that you actually care about to get that.
That's my follow-up question. And
that's
since the
Right.
minute
Yeah.
one I played Destiny 1,
We talked
this
about
is
a
what I
lot.
always wanted. If I could have good inner accuracy at any cost, take away my super, my radar, my exotic, whatever, I will do it. I'm that kind of player. So the question is, what are your thoughts on allowing players to greatly improve their inner accuracy or flinch reduction, even at a steep or extreme cost?
Here we go. Fingers crossed.
So firstly, we heard it here first. I'm taking away everybody's super and exotics, and they can.
Cam would do it. He would do it.
I would do it.
Yeah, the world in which we adjust how in-air accuracy works. I think it's a sufficiently like bone-breaking change that it's not something we can roll out super fast. But it is something we've talked about making adjustments to. Like, for example, what if you had perfect in-air accuracy, but you had 0 aim assist? So if your aim
Yeah, I mean, for primary weapons, to be clear, like in-air sniping is nuts.
Yeah, in-air sniping is nuts. I think also it would immediately reveal who's really great at aiming and who just thought they were before we took away their aim assist.
Love the way you put that, man.
We have had that conversation a few times.
Spicy.
Led by Merc in particular.
I have a bone to pick with that, but yeah.
He surely does. Yeah, we literally were sitting here. I mean, before we were even putting this document together, the talk about aerial accuracy, we've always talked about, like, it's almost like a game. Like, what would you do for a Klondike bar? It's like, what would you give up for aerial accuracy? What would you give up? And Cammy's like, don't push me, bro. It's like, all right, we limit your playtime.
No, like you literally, like you offer that to hunters. You're like, you no longer have a dodge, but you have better inner accuracy. And like immediately that changes the way the game is played at certain levels of gameplay. So.
I would probably do it. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a very interesting topic. Chris, when you said a bone breaking change, do you mean that like if we're like, hey, you know what, let's tinker with in-air accuracy? Like if you didn't approach it just right, then like overnight there would be like panic. Like if it was tuned wrong, like it would come in way too hot.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing which requires an enormous amount of testing, basically. And you need to have a ton of people in the studio who are both sort of average players and like, mobility skill gap nerds, right? Yeah, it's a hard change to get right, and it's an easy change to kind of break PvP with. So it's we'd have to go into pretty cautiously. Just because I noticed this in the chat, people asking about like certain primary weapons in PvE. I think that certain weapons are like in a pretty bad place in high-end content, and we are actually looking at tuning, like PvE tuning specifically for, I think it was hand cannons, scout rifles, machine guns, reasonably soon. Not PvP, like we've got like separate changes for those, but those are changes that we can make pretty safely.
Yeah, we had that question on our list, didn't we? The thought about the PvE precision damage nerf that went like Shadowkeep, right? That's when it rolled out. And yeah, interesting. Okay, very interesting.
Well, I could sleep happy. That one exceeded my expectations on just reception for that. So thank you.
Yeah. But all right, fair. Cammy, keep going. You got more, buddy. I'm looking right here.
Oh, do I have more?
Oh, you got more. I was gonna have you go until the next wave.
Deal. Okay. What are your thoughts on people quick swapping slug shotguns for higher DPS in PvE, and by proxy, the quick swap glitch?
I think that we were okay with the quick swap glitch because people didn't really need it because they had quick draw up 100% of the time. And now that we've touched quick draw, it's probably something we're going to have to look at. So I think that it's this sort of word of mouth, like skill move thing, which just isn't accessible to everyone. And so if you don't have another way of quick swapping weapons, you probably shouldn't be able to just choose to do it.
For reference, I don't know how to not do it at this point after so many years. So, next question: did the quick draw nerf have its intended effect? I know TB is in the chat.
Yeah, if you'd asked me before I looked at the data for this, I would have said probably not. But actually, yes, it did more or less exactly what we were hoping. Quick draw perk usage on all types of weapons was super high. Like it was the #1 perk in the left column across all weapon types. and that's like halved, so it's still like top 3 or something. But yeah, so that worked pretty well. The usage of like aggressive weapon subfamilies has dropped a bit, like particularly the dominant ones. Aggressive snipers, hand cannons, shotguns has dropped a bit, and usage of Felwinter's Lie and Astral Horizon has dropped as well, and that's before the new shotguns dropped, because those all came out mid-season, right? So yeah, I never thought it was going to like seriously move the needle, like push people away from shotguns or like stop people using aggressives, but it has reduced shotgun usage and it's diversified which shotguns people are using, which is great. And like we've already said that we're taking another look at shotguns later this season. But I think this is at least taking some of the edge off.
So there was a lot
For
of thought going around that the quick draw nerf, including my own personal opinion, that the quick draw nerf was maybe a little bit of overkill. I don't know that people were having issues with quick draw on other weapons, and there was a lot of focus of quick draw on like Felwinters because it was such a high usage weapon. But are you saying that that was intended because quick draw usage was so high on every type of gun across the board, that that was actually what you were wanting to do? It wasn't just to try to target Felwinter and then overkill. It was literally like quick draw is the number one perk across the board. We just want to bring that down.
Yeah, and it's one of these risk reward things, right? Like we were giving away a huge amount of power, like plus 100 handling, just for equipping a single perk, like no kills, nothing required, right? That's just way too much. And so like the Eye of Sauron came onto the perk because it was so popular on like Felwinter's and Astral Horizon, but looking at it, we're like, that's actually not right. We should adjust this while we're in there. And I think it pushes people towards diversifying their perks a bit, which is good. Like, hey, if you want super snappy hand cannon, maybe take snapshot. And people are actually doing that, which is positive as well. And I don't think, like, we haven't seen people just completely stop using quick draw, which I think was a valid concern.
Okay. This is a viewer question that I think was very important to them. This is crit damage in PvE. What are your thoughts on PvE precision damage nerf that went out in Shadowkeep that hurt headshot damage on accurate weapons like hand cannons or scout rifles?
He definitely didn't mention that already, but I'd still like to hear
my bad on that.
Yeah, that's all good. Yeah,
Yeah. I did mention we're taking a look at PvE damage on particularly scout rifles, hand cannons, and machine guns. I think, yeah, the precision damage nerf in Shadowkeep hurt the feel of a lot of primary weapons in PvE, and I don't think we're going to like just completely roll that back. Like the game's different now, but we're probably going to look at ways to mitigate it for a subset of weapons anyway. Yeah, no timeline.
fair enough. All right, everybody at home, get ready to take a shot because the time has come. It is now
Cones.
cone time. Merc,
Cones.
take me to the cone zone, baby.
So we are going to start at real high level, and then as soon as you answer, we're gonna get a little bit deeper into it. But can you please, for the listeners out there, can you please clearly define what aim assist is in Destiny 2?
So it's a sort of general term for like two specific concepts or like weapon stats, which comprise what we call like, Bungie kind of invented all of this sort of tuning, so you'll have to forgive us for having terminology which is wildly different from what the community uses. But we have this thing called auto aim, which corrects a projectile towards a target that's inside the cone angle, which you could call bullet bending. I know people say bullet magnetism, but that's confusing because of another term that we use, so say bullet bending. And then we have magnetism, which is basically reticle friction and adhesion, which slows your reticle down when you move it over a target, or if the target moves, it might slightly drag your reticle with them. So those two concepts, you could call that reticle friction or stickiness.
All right.
And then the stat
yeah.
typically changes or adjusts both of those.
What
And
did
the
you say there?
difference-
Hold on, we have the situation here where if someone talks right at the second that Chris begins to talk, his microphone becomes overruled, as if in a courtroom.
Yeah, so the aim assist stat governs how both of those are mapped onto weapons.
And So the aim assist stat does potentially affect the amount of what you guys call magnetism, what we have referred to externally as like reticle friction or reticle stickiness.
Right.
Interesting. I know Drew is chomping at the bit to get to this stuff here. Do you want to go ahead and take yours, and then I'll come back in with some of the specific stuff? Because he was like right on the cusp of talking about the what I know you want to talk about.
I wanted to ask actually first, like, so when the aim assist stat like governs the reticle, or we're gonna say the magnetism part, which is externally we said reticle friction.
The bullet bending, did he say?
No,
it's
the
different.
Oh, we're talking about the friction.
controller
Okay, the friction.
magnetism.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Does that make it like so it's like stronger friction or just a wider area before you start to experience a standard level of friction? Does that make sense? Like more pull instead of like a wider area before you start to get pull.
So it would be the cone angle, and then range determines where the fall off starts. So if you have like a super high aim assist weapon with a really small range stat, then you won't feel much stickiness most of the time because the target's too far away and you're past the fall off.
I think what he's asking is like if you increase the cone angle with the aim assist stat, does that affect how far away from the target your reticle starts to slow down, or is that always set? Or like is aim assist affecting how much your reticle slows down?
That's
Oh, I'd have to actually double check that. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that changes the magnetism cone angle.
cone angle. Cool.
Okay, gotcha.
Speaking of things that change magnetism or aim assist in general, it has been long a curiosity of ours. How does accuracy, because accuracy is very often listed as a different effect. For example, a perk like opening shot says it increases accuracy. A lot of people in the community feel that when a gun is more accurate, they are getting increased bullet increased bullet bending or something like that. Is that something that happens? Like, does accuracy affect aim assist in any way? Because I know that there's projectile accuracy and there's error angle, right? And I believe that those are the terms that you guys have used in the past.
Right. So they're related concepts. Accuracy and aim assist are what we would call auto aim internally, but there's no direct connection there. Probably what's happening is you're aiming roughly at a target's head, and your aim assist pulls your aim towards the head, or pulls your ball towards the head. But then the accuracy cone, if your accuracy, so there's the accuracy stat which maps onto the accuracy cone, right? Like the higher the accuracy stat is, the smaller the accuracy cone is, which determines how far away from what you're aiming at the bullet can go. So if you've got like moderate aim assist and really high accuracy, your bullets are going where you're aiming. And if you've got a low accuracy stat, they might go a little bit off target. So it'll feel like you're getting better hit registration with high accuracy, if that makes sense.
So I think that actually kind of was what we assumed that it did, right? Like we assumed that if you had a very wide, because there's like multiple cones, at least as far as we understand, there's an aim assist cone and then there's an accuracy cone, right? And if the accuracy cone was the only thing that mattered, then the aim assist cone would be irrelevant, and we know that that's not the case. So what we kind of hypothesized happened was that if you had increased accuracy, the auto aim would then be like extremely effective as opposed to just like, pretty effective, I guess is kind of how we thought about it. I mean, yeah.
As an analogy, if you remember the way that shotguns worked before Season of the Worthy, I think, right? Like we changed shotguns so they don't get aim assist to the head anymore, right? But prior to that, you could get shotgun aim assist to the head, but most of your pellet spread would miss the head because you're firing out all your projectiles in this cone, right? So accuracy is sort of similar to that, in that, yeah, you can miss the thing that you're directly aiming at if your accuracy is too low.
A lot of that in D1.
Yeah.
Less of it in D2, thankfully.
Yeah, less in D2. So then there's your starting initial accuracy, and then there's final accuracy as the weapon keeps going.
Which is what we refer to as bloom, usually.
Yeah, or fire rate to final.
Yeah, exactly.
So does the, and I know you can't talk about all this entirely, but the aim assist cone also has some type of similar like constriction to it as it fires. or is it just always static?
That's something that I would have to like double check and verify. Good one
Fair
to know.
enough.
Next one of these.
Yeah. Hopefully there's another.
Yeah.
So are we content with that discussion?
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
content. I mean, yeah.
It's a
Okay.
lot to chew on, a lot to think about.
Yeah, that's I'm like sitting here, I'm like,
I'm
whoa.
I'm happy to move on to Drew. Did you want to handle flinch, and then I'll jump in later for shotgun?
I
Or
think
we-
there's
or-
one more question.
There's more. Okay, here, keep it going then.
Can you speak to the differences? And there's a lot of belief differences.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Aim assist and accuracy on mouse and keyboard as opposed to controller.
Yeah, so the two things that I mentioned, auto aim or bullet bending and magnetism and reticle friction. So auto aim is present at the same strength on mouse and keyboard and on controller. So the degree to which we kind of aim for you. Magnetism or reticle friction is only present on controller. Accuracy is present on both, but accuracy is effectively higher on mouse and keyboard. So like your shots go more where you're aiming on mouse and keyboard by like 20%. If you remember in when was this? Season 13? We did the stability or the recoil changes, mouse and keyboard recoil changes. And
Yeah.
accuracy as well, right? So it was like mouse and keyboard has 40% recoil or 40% less recoil and a 40% smaller accuracy cone, and we reduced that basically to 20%, but there's still a difference.
Cool.
It also varies, like it's hand tuned per weapon, so there's kind of ballpark numbers.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that with last word, I guess, would be an example, like something that could be hand tuned.
Yeah, but it's more generally per archetype as well. Like last word is a special snowflake that has just a giant pile of custom tuning in it.
Okay. Cool. Awesome.
You know, all these mechanics going on, man, and it just makes the Destiny gunplay feel so good, dude. So
Yeah, the 11 herbs and spices are right on, bro.
Yep.
For what
So
makes a
good.
gun feel good. Drew, are we satisfied about the and are
I'm
we
good, man.
we're good? Okay.
Until next time, at least.
Is it-
Right?
Because we can
Until
keep going if more thoughts are
was-
popping into your head on the cone factor or the aim assist talk. All right, we're good. Okay, let's
was
talk
that
about flinch. Is flinch deterministic? Is shooting through flinch meant to be intuitive?
So I can't speak to initial intent for this necessarily, but it is random but weighted towards the damage source. So if someone's shooting you, you'll get bounced around, but generally your aim will be pulled towards them.
Right.
And as to whether it's meant to be intuitive, like it's meant to be intuitive in the sense that it's very hard to do and you can't directly compensate for it with thumb skill, right? Like you need to wait it out or like break line of sight or something, not like try to find a way to shoot back combating the flinch, for better or for worse.
I'm realizing now that I forgot to rephrase one of these. Well, it's okay. F it. We'll do it live. So let's talk about the level of flinch currently on primary weapons. I'm sure if I were to do a poll of the community, definitely of the people currently sitting at the table right now, that most people would probably say that they don't like the level of flinch currently on primary weapons. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I sure hate getting flinched when I'm trying to shoot someone. But it does serve a purpose, right? Like you couldn't just take it away; you'd need to replace it with something, because flinch rewards tactical play, and being able to directly counter like a good tactical play with thumb skill is probably not something that we want. I think there's certainly room to discuss, and like this, if we were to ever look at this, it would be super long term, right? Because flinch is so deeply ingrained into our weapon systems; it's not something we could just turn off easily. But you can imagine a system that achieves the same goals in a different way, and that would be fine.
Descoping from Halo, for example.
Like I love the hell out of descope, right? Like we're never going to put it into Destiny. But like I was working on Halo 5. We had flinch in the game, and we took it out like last minute and replaced it with descope. But like we had something we could just fall back on. Right, it's a bit different. But that also is like it's incredibly punishing to get descoped. At least your reticle doesn't move, so you can keep shooting. But anyway, tangent.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I am a big fan of the descope. I'm trying to think of which is the lesser of two evils for me. Boys, would you rather be flinched or descoped?
Descoped.
I'm probably gonna agree.
Descope was fine in Halo because you had great hipfire accuracy, right? And
Yeah, it's
Oh,
different.
right. Yeah,
it
it's a
would
little
be
different there.
crushing.
It's
Yeah.
way different. In this
Yeah.
game, like,
Being-
imagine being taken out of your accurate state to a point where like it's like completely inaccurate.
That's
I
true.
think
Halo, you get
I'd rather
descoped.
get
You just
flinched.
keep on going on with the hip fire, baby. You get descoped out of a 120. You're like, oh god, what do I do?
Yeah.
I'm curious. Now that I heard you the answer about flinch, what do you? Here's an interesting thought. What would you think would happen if overnight there was a massive reduction of primary weapon flinch? Chris, do you think there would be like panic in the, what do you think would be what problems would arise from reducing flinch on primary weapons?
So I think about the case where I come around a corner into someone who's got, say, they've got a sniper rifle or like a fusion or something, and I like get the first shot on them, and I'm like, yeah, like open this up, they are definitely going to die, and they just turn around and one shot me. I don't think that's a positive experience. Like, so if we just turned that off right away, I think we'd see lots of people losing fights that they thought they should have won because they opened.
But primary weapons, though.
Sure, yeah. I think like the same as that's a fair point. I think the same is true of even if it was just primary weapons. Like you engage someone with a weapon that's slightly out of range, right? Like, or you come around a corner into someone, you're like aiming at the side of their head, and you've got an auto rifle, and they've got a sidearm, and they notice you doing it and turn around and 3-tap you or something. I think that's still a problem. So
Yeah.
it would never roll out like we just remove flinch. For that reason.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, Chris. All right.
I already said I give up the super.
He'll give it up.
Going in with white gear.
So here's the question I wonderfully forgot to rephrase because I'm an idiot. We know that you've been with Bungie since 2019. So obviously as you mentioned, the flinch has been deeply ingrained into the core of D1. So we're not going to sit here and be like, hey, Chris, why'd you program flinch this way? Because it's not you. But you do have the developer mindset that you can comment with. So currently, for those of you listening at home, and you even mentioned that if flinch works in a very odd way where there is the potential that if you're aiming off of a target and then you get shot with flinch, you can be flinched, your crosshair can be flinched onto the target. And again, this is before your time, but just do you have any thoughts or opinions on that on general? Do you think that there's anything that could be tinkered with in that department?
Well, I think there's even ways within the system to adjust this. Like, that should happen extremely rarely on snipers now because I fucking hit flinch with a hammer on snipers. I think it's more likely to happen on other weapons. I think it is beneficial to the person being shot because it means their aim just isn't going further and further away from their target, right? Like there's a limit. But it does end up in this weird place where sometimes you shoot someone twice and now they're aiming dead on again, which doesn't feel great. So there's probably room to improve it. Yeah, I don't really have thoughts beyond that.
That's fair. Yeah, we just wanted the developer mindset there. How dare you program the flinch that way, Chris? I'm just kidding, of course.
No, really.
We good with flinch before we Merc?
Yeah, it's something like no distractions. You gave it a big buff recently, and like things like that you can feel on Mida. So
Yeah, I mean, did we were we supposed to talk about the mods? I don't remember what we edited out of this. Are we allowed to ask about that stuff? Like, do stacking unflinching mods actually have an increased effect? Are you better off just using one mod, or are we not allowed to ask about that?
Yeah, you can ask about that.
Alright. Well, then I'm asking.
So mods are actually built by the armor team, so I won't go super specific, but yeah, they do stack, and the maximum benefit you can get from like stacking 2 unflinching mods is the same as no distractions, so a 35% reduction.
Do the mods stack with no distractions as well? So like you can like double up on that if you have both those cards.
Yeah, they stack multiplicatively.
Ooh,
Oh, okay.
interesting.
Glad we asked that. Anything else under the flinch umbrella? Anybody?
Just more complaints about it. That's pretty
Bueller?
much it.
I feel like good ground was covered. All right, why don't we?
I'm good.
They'll mess you up in PvE, dude. For Flint.
True story. All right, we're getting into more specific territory here. Let's talk about shotguns. Can you talk about? You can talk a little bit how shotgun aim assist works.
Yeah, so the same like general stuff that I was talking about before apply, where you have auto aim and magnetism, what we call them anyway. So when your reticle is over a target, we'll pull towards, like pull your, where the weapon's actually firing towards the middle of that target. So if you've got a shotgun and the other person's, like center of the other person's body is within your aim assist cone, we'll pull that burst or that shot towards them. But then the pellet spread could still miss. If that makes sense.
It's
So, like,
more
shifts
sense
the
than you
spread?
know.
But it can't compress the spread.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I just had that epiphany with you guys. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
That does make sense.
And this is also why we made that Season of the Worthy change, right? Because before that, if you're aiming at someone's head, your aim could be dead on, but your spread would like just go around their head because the head's too small and so big. So it was actually a fairly big buff to shotguns to have it only aim at the body.
I cannot wait to ask this question. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. You have no idea how often, Chris, people will come into... I'm sure we all have our own versions of this question, where people come into Twitch chat or the YouTube comment section or Twitter or wherever, where people talk about like, oh, I've totally discovered a hidden perk, right? So here, I'll just read the question. I've heard rumors for a long time about having some shotgun barrels having a hidden ability or certain barrels beyond smoothbore full choke having some kind of hidden benefit to a pellet spread when not mentioned in the barrel description. Can you please confirm, is that true or false?
Those are the only 2 shotgun barrels that have anything to do with spread. Basically, it only influences spread if it says something about it in the description. There is one weird edge case, which is like first shotgun I ever shipped was the reprise of the Ikalos shotgun, which has the regular barrel selection instead of the shotgun barrel.
More. Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we noticed that. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And extended
Got it.
directly increases damage fall off a little bit on top of changing range. But I think that's the only other barrel that has anything that's not stated in the description.
Let me write that down. Extended barrel?
On the Ikelos Shoddy reprisal only.
Oh, for
For
now.
myself.
For now.
All right, we're using it in PvP. That's the new meta.
New meta confirmed.
Rapid fire shotgun lol.
Okay. Was this... Man, did I completely botch this document? Did we not have the info to go into the... If this is something where you're like, I need a document, I need a spreadsheet, you just tell me. We'll shut the question down. I'll hit the button. Question shut down. We'll call Dylan.
Oh, that's all at the bottom, isn't it?
Does stability on a shotgun do anything for the user as far as accuracy, aim assist, or target acquisition? Like, what is the stability factor on a shotgun, especially like maybe the one and done shotguns, like the aggressive frame, you know?
Stability stat doesn't influence anything beyond what it says on the tin, basically. There are systems, though, that might make it feel like they do, because we have, like, you know, accuracy or bloom and that kind of thing, which behaves in a similar way to how recoil does, but stability influences recoil, it doesn't influence accuracy.
Thank you. Okay, good. I'm glad that wasn't on the list of do not ask. Cool guy. You wanna dive in here with a couple of the questions that we got in the general umbrella?
Sure. So Zen Moment is a pretty interesting perk. What does it actually do?
Well, it does not do what it says in the perk description.
Okay.
Stability, right? It doesn't change the stability stat or anything like that. What it actually does, it reduces the maximum recoil angle, and it stacks based on the number of hits.
Like ×5 or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's 5 is the maximum.
Yep.
Is that recoil angle the same thing that you guys were talking about when you said you changed like the camera angle on pulse rifles and that most recent pulse rifle stability buff? You said you didn't actually like change the recoil. You changed, I guess. I don't know. I look.
Yeah,
What was the camera shifting?
What I said in the TWAB was we changed like camera movement, or what might be called simulated input. And what Zen Moment does, it just changes the recoil directly of the weapon.
Kind of straightens everything out.
So if it's already at 100 recoil direction, would Zen Moment effectively do anything?
Yes, because it reduces the maximum deflection. Still.
Okay.
So it doesn't increase the
clear-
stability stat, but it still effectively increases the stability of the gun because the gun no longer jumps as much as it did.
Yeah, it kind of clamps how high your gun can jump.
Okay.
Good perk.
Huh.
So for big bodied guns, that's the way to do it. Zen Moment.
So do you think that, we've talked a lot about it. Do you think that aim assist is the most important part of the secret sauce that you guys do that make weapons feel so good?
And I think it's a combination. Aim assist is probably the single biggest contributor, but like the way that aim assist and the recoil animation of the weapon and the rate of fire and like all of these other systems feed into feeling like the moment your gun's steady, it's like it's exactly the right time to shoot again and like all of these kinds of things. But I think that the specific way that Destiny aim assist works is probably the biggest contributor.
Those two systems just working hand in hand.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you approach balance between control options? And we talked earlier, like what we'd say DMT and Last Word, how they kind of flip-flop as far as feel.
So the short meme answer is we don't, kind of. Like mouse and keyboard is like you can just 180 on a dime, you can like instantly point at anyone, right? Like it's got to be impossible to 100% balance those without doing some like really egregious things, which we don't want to do. But I think we do want to take some of the edges off, right? We want mouse and keyboard players to care about the same weapon stats that controller players do. And that's why, for example, we tackled the recoil scaler stuff. I think really, though, we don't really want mouse and keyboard players playing against controller players so much. Like, we don't think that's a particularly fair fight. And I don't think that anyone has really solved it. If you can think of someone who has, please send me a link because I would love to know.
Unfair for who?
I think that in general, mouse and keyboard players have the advantage. I think there are specific situations in Destiny where, like, magnetism on controller can help you aim to an extent that, or to such a great extent that it can give you the edge, right? Like, sidearms play better on controller than they do on mouse and keyboard, in my opinion. And it's like at certain particular ranges that can be true.
Cool.
We're getting to the bottom of the barrel here. Oh God, Chris, my apologies. I had so many versions of this damn document floating around. I'm pretty sure that what I'm looking here is like, Dylan, don't panic. If you're listening right now, none of this falls under the bucket of like you can't say that. These are like numeric. I'm just worried about like, Chris, do you have a document that you can refer to for any of these final numeric questions. If you don't, and be like, Fallout, I don't have the spreadsheet here, that's fine. You just tell me. But again, apology. I had like 7 different versions of this goddamn fucking document floating around. But let's dive into the final questions here. Drew, this was your question, wasn't it? The aim assist cone of snipers here. I can't.
Yeah, I can kind of paraphrase this. It's
Yeah.
a weird question. So I was wondering, like, I don't know if this is like overly specific, and if it is, if you have to think about it, just don't worry about it. I was wondering, like, what are you able to say what the cone angle is of snipers with like 0 aim assist versus like 100 aim assist?
Yeah, so 0 aim assist, and I have the data open, is 0.825 degrees.
Holy shit.
Assist is 1.375 degrees. That's before the sniper zoom scalers.
Yeah, and I guess the follow-up would be like, how does sniper zoom? So we know that sniper zoom scales like changed how the aim assist worked with it, right? But like it was very, very general, like it wasn't really deeply explained. How does that kind of work? And does 1 point of zoom make a difference? Because we have new snipers like Predator's Revenge with 49 zoom stat, and then versus something like Frozen Orbit with 50. Is that like enough to make that difference happen?
So technically 1 point of zoom makes a difference, but man, the difference has got to be so small, I'll bet you couldn't tell.
Okay.
But in terms of the numbers, and I feel like, I thought we'd mentioned this in a talk somewhere, maybe we didn't. Anyway, at 60 zoom, the cone is 20% wider, which is quite a lot, and probably explains some of the weirdness that people have seen with a certain high zoom sniper the last couple of weeks.
Yes, sir.
At 50 zoom, it's more or less unchanged, and at 35 zoom, which is the lowest, the cone angle is reduced by 40%-ish. This is all like on a curve, and so like reading the exact numbers off a curve is tricky, but yeah, and then so above 60 zoom, if there is a sniper above 60 zoom, it would be capped at 20% larger.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I have to jump in here or I'm not going to get to sleep tonight thinking about this question. Okay, so you very handily read off those numbers for the cone size of the sniper, which we greatly appreciate.
Awesome.
Do you have any other numbers you can share? Do you have the hand cannon aim assist cone numbers?
Yeah. I think I might have actually mentioned this in a talk at one point as well. The hand cannon one it's a lot larger. Hand cannons are super forgiving.
We know.
Interesting.
So at 0 aim assist, a hand cannon is 2.5 degrees cone angle, and at 100 it's 3 degrees. So minimum to maximum is half a degree.
Okay. What is the weapon with the largest range of degree? Is that a question you can answer? Like
That would be a hard one to look up super fast.
So it'd be something like probably like a Mida.
Yeah, and well, Mida cheats a bit because it's the only scout rifle with aim assist above 80, right? So it gets like 20 whole points of aim assist all to itself. Yeah, actually, the scout rifle's not that wide, so hand cannons have more variants.
Yeah.
Nah, not really.
The
biggest one.
These are huge answers. I really appreciate it. I kind of feel like I'm peeking into the Ark of the Covenant here. Do you have are there like, help me out here, boys, are there any other numbers that we could thinking of checking on right now before this opportunity slips away?
The entire episode of number checking. Let me pull up the spreadsheet and go over every number I have a question mark next to in the damage dealing factors. But can you speak as to how zoom affects like these aim assist cones? Like, does the angle stay the same when you zoom in, or does the angle constrict, or is like the functional difference of when you're zoomed in versus when you're not zoomed in something that happens because your field of view is changing?
That one I'm actually not sure on. But it's like FOV and stuff changes at the same time, makes it a little bit difficult to measure. Yeah, like basically when you're zoomed, you have the full aim assist cone, and the main difference in hip fire is that we basically don't give you aim assist for headshots, we only give you aim assist for body shots.
Unless
So
you're
it's
included
something-
finality and cool guy, in which case you hit all your headshots.
Yeah, apparently I looked at the data and there's nothing that suggests that there was anything seriously weird going on, and we turn off aim assist in hip fire and sniper rifles completely. So I don't know.
Hear that, boys? I'm just cracked.
Yeah,
Don't worry
we
about it.
looked at the data and confirmed that Cool Guy's a goddamned unit.
So, talking about that, like, it makes me think of Arantil. It makes me think of fusion rifles. With that zoom, you took that away.
Mhm.
So, when you change that, the angle just kind of went back to normal, I'd say, or whatever the base. I think it's 1.6 times zoom for those. So is that kind of what happens?
A whole bunch of stuff is influenced by zoom.
Yeah.
So like recoil and whatnot are big ones. Shoot, actually don't have that list to hand.
We didn't put this question on the list, so that's
that's
entirely our own fault for going
free
off on
ball in
tangent.
here.
That's what I
think.
Don't answer anything you can't confidently answer.
But I think what I can say is that like zoom definitely increases your damage fall off, like auto aim, magnetism, everything. So the more zoomed in you are, the like stickier your aim is, the easier it is to hit your shots.
And that's why multi-mock feels so good compared to other lightweight SMGs.
High zoom scope on multi-mark,
Mhm.
it's even more of a laser than without, and there's a reason for that. Even if you take away the damage boost that it gets.
Wait, so I have to clarify this because we're going to get a million questions on it. So you say it increases the magnetism and the auto aim. Does that mean that it increases the distance at which those are active, or it increases the base amount so you functionally have more, even at say at 10 meters with a high zoom scope, do you have the same amount?
It increases the distance at which they're active.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
the way all this fall off stuff works for aim assist and magnetism and damage is there's a distance in meters at which it will start to fall off, and a distance at which it falls off completely, and either it goes to zero or it goes to a minimum value.
Okay, good. So, because I know that this was something many years ago in Crucible Playbook that was like picked over for years, and we never really got like the full confirmation to it. And I still see on Reddit sometimes like you should increase your range because you get more aim assist even at like point blank range. And I was like, I don't think that that's the way that worked, but.
Getting down to the bottom of the barrel here. Can you tell us how much aim assist tunnel vision gives?
Yeah. So it gives you 20 aim assist stat and 20 accuracy, and also a very small multiplier to the cone and like the auto aim and magnetism cone angles.
Oh, those combined are massive.
Ooh, that's
good.
Yeah, that's why it feels so good.
Yeah.
It's a good perk, yeah. Is that a similar? Are those numbers similar to heating up, which is kind of like the? I don't know.
They're like yin and yang, man.
Yeah, exactly. Heads and tails there. Yeah.
Yeah, heating up gives like 15% accuracy per stack.
Really? Is the only way to affect accuracy perks that say they affect accuracy and increasing range?
Well, not all perks that affect accuracy might say so necessarily. Like there are a bunch of like particularly exotics and these sorts of things where we fiddle with a bunch of stuff behind the scenes and like don't call it out explicitly in the perk descriptions. Also, certain weapons have that stat exposed, I guess, like bows just have an accuracy stat. Right?
Cool.
Cool guy, what up?
I just wanted to say, I mean, you guys have done a really good job these past couple. I mean, chain reaction, lasting impression, heating up, killing. Even go back to Killing Wind. You know, they've been really great additions to the game. You know, as a player, man. So
It's convinced me to hunt entirely new weapons season after season, even without being necessarily forced to by sunsetting, which I'm very, very much appreciative of.
Yeah.
Killing Wind was the first perk that I ever made at Bungie.
Really?
it's like my favorite perk.
That's cool guy's
wow,
favorite
that's
perk.
so cool.
Yeah.
And
It
geez,
makes some weapons goated. So yeah.
Are there, man, I'm pushing my luck here. Are there any numbers that you can share on Killing Wind? If not, okay.
I think it's just a straight plus 20 mobility. It's like a reduction similar to lightweight to aim down sights. No, it's similar to moving target to aim down sights movement speed, but way higher. Like the Killing Wind aim down sights penalty reduction is massive. It's like 30% or something crazy. And then handling and range, and it's range and like a scalar to damage fall off. Small scalar.
Sure. I think I have 3 questions left. Any info or numbers you can share on opening shot?
That I don't know off the top of my head. And
That's fair enough.
I don't have it to hand. I actually made Killing Wind, so I remember a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that is true.
Oh, that's awesome.
I guess if you literally make it, maybe the data's a little more imprinted in your brain.
So
Um,
you mentioned, sorry to interrupt, on the topic of
Sure.
Killing Wind, you mentioned that it gives you like the strafe speed. So I don't know if I'm like 100% on this, but I think stochastic variable can get like Killing Wind, elemental capacitor, and on stasis, elemental capacitor reduces the ADS penalty. Would those things stack? Like if I had Killing Wind for like strafe speed, and then the ADS penalty reduction on elemental capacitor with stasis, would that stack?
Yeah, it'll stack multiplicatively.
so is there a rule for what stacks and what doesn't stack? Like, we've been told when the TWAB came out about the reload perks that there's like not only stat boosts, which are numerical stat boosts, but there's like scalars that can go on top of it to where even if you maxed out your stat, you still get some benefit from these perks. Like, is there a rule of thumb we can use for like looking at perks and stuff? Like, this is going to stack with this, or this won't stack with this, or are we kind of just case by case?
Yeah, it's all case by case, and they're kind of all over the place. Like in some cases where we want a perk to want you to be able to feel a perk, even if your stat is capped, we will give you a little bump on top of that. In cases where we're giving you multiple stats, we'll tend not to bother because probably you'll feel one of them, and that'll be fine. And then yeah, so say you had a reload perk that would be capped at 100 reload, and then there would be a scalar, which isn't directly capped, but there's a like minimum playback time for the animation that can't exceed. But none of the perks get anywhere near that anyway.
Now, Chris, you've been a really good sport. I want to make sure that I'm respecting your time here. I feel like we're coming to the end. I mean, like,
Yeah.
in a perfect world, if we had full reign, oh man, we'd keep you here all night. But yeah, come on, we gotta be respectful. You've been a really good sport, but like, come on, how many more opportunities are we gonna get like on a day-to-day basis? Just personal question. I'm soon going to be diving back into the world of tinkering with shotguns, which I'd love to do. I rolled my eyes if you're listening at home. Is there anything you can share with me at all, numerically maybe, behind shotguns? Anything at all? Is a very broad question. You've already covered a great deal about shotguns. I'm just trying to think if there's any numbers that you could share that would maybe put off a light bulb in my head, like. And if
Do you
not,
guys know the lethal kill distances for shotguns? Can you just give Fallout a list of all the lethal kill distances so that he never has to test again?
I mean,
but that would be
we
a range, wouldn't it? Say again, Chris?
We mostly refer to Fallout's videos for figuring that stuff out. Yeah, I mean, we kind of come to the same conclusion that like pellet spread is a more of an important determining factor than like damage fall off is for shotgun lethality. So the and aggressive shotguns just have way higher damage per pellet, so they get around this. But other than that, you want the tightest spread you can get.
Is that similar to fusions as well? Because we very recently saw the fusion buff that kind of scaled the range, I guess, for them, which I believe is effectively for their damage fall. I don't think even with no composure coming out that we've seen a huge uptick in rapid fire usage. I mean, it was very low before, so it probably has gone up compared to what it was. But I still think that high impact fusions are seeing by far the most play. Although Plug One is making a strong push for it, especially with the perk selections that it has. But is that kind of similar to the way fusions work too, where it's almost more about compressing the bolts and getting more bolts to hit than it is about the damage fall off of those bolts?
Yeah, I think it depends. Like, it varies a bit fusion by fusion because like if you have, say, a particularly high zoom one, then that affects your stability and damage fall off a lot, so you don't need either of those stats that much. But my observation has been that you want as much stability as you can get with the way fusions are currently set up, because missing a bolt is so much more punishing than having a little bit more fall off.
I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
It's awesome to hear stuff like that we have theory crafted on for literally years. And to hear that you guys also do similar theory crafting behind the scenes when you're making these tweaks and tunes and stuff like that. And to see how things align or how things don't align between what we think is the way it is and what you think is the way it is. I am freaking over the moon that you and Kevin came on the show. I can't even describe it.
It's literally like we've been sitting here eating food and we're like, I think there's saffron in this. Yeah, there's definitely a hint. I think there's a little bit of cinnamon. And then we get the chef on it and there is saffron. And Merc is like, yeah, I knew it, dude. It's in there, bro.
I'm telling you on Reddit for 4 years, man.
I don't know about you guys. I only have one more question for Chris. One more.
No.
Maybe the most important question. Drew, if you have more, I'll let you go.
I have one more, just on behalf of some things I was seeing in chat earlier.
Sure. Go on, Drew.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. I feel like this might be a little longer one. What was the design philosophy behind the Vex Mythoclast? How do you bring back such a monumental weapon? And it seems like it came back almost in a very different way than Destiny 1. How do you preserve its legacy? What do you think of how it landed? Just, what are your thoughts on the Vex Mythoclast?
So, I wasn't the designer of the Vex Mythoclast. You'll be delighted to know that we have more than one weapon designer. We're super fortunate. I was a designer on Hawkmoon, so I know what it's like bringing a weapon back from Destiny 1 and trying to meet those expectations. What I will say about Vex Mythoclast, though, is that people remember the crazy overpowered launch version of that and not the, nerfed into obscurity version. So we couldn't bring back the crazy overpowered version. We didn't want to bring back the, really crappy version. So we wanted to do something that felt true to what that weapon was trying to be and, gave it a Destiny 2 level exotic weapon pass. Because Vex Mythoclast, if we just brought it back straight away, it wouldn't be an exotic in Destiny 2. It's not interesting enough, I guess. I do think that there's some tuning to be done there, and we should expect to see something change sometime relatively soon. Maybe next season, maybe later. I'm not exactly sure when, but yeah, it's it's not landing as strong as we wanted it to.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Most important question that we asked tonight. Final question. Do you laugh or cry when you hear news on Twitter about Telesto?
I think it's amazing. It's like the canary in the gold mine, or canary in the coal mine, right? Anytime anyone working on any part of the game makes a thing, it's reasonably likely Telesto is going to break it in some way. It doesn't even have to be someone working on weapons, right? We've had ability stuff, we've had armor stuff, random things in exotics or raids or whatever, where if something's not set up exactly correctly, then Telesto just makes it all fall apart. I think it's amazing.
I don't know who over there made that gun. I want to like high five them and like laugh and cry at the same time while having a beer. Like I wonder like I'm not gonna get into like are they still
Dude,
there? Because like there's just
That
funny.
sounds like an ornament. Canary in the coal mine.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
Oh, that's a good
Eververse,
one.
hit me up for the royalties. I got you.
Yeah, 10% goes to Cammy. Eververse. This is
I
just
love Telesto.
I have a fun vision in my head of whoever, if they're still at Bungie, whoever designed the weapon. It's like just poking their head into the office. Steve, yeah, it happened again. Yeah, good job, buddy. You proud? I think that's all I got. I mean, again, we're not going to drag it out because we're going to respect your time, and we had a very clear and concise document about what we can talk about here tonight. And man, just outstanding conversation. I really want to thank you for coming on the show. If you and Kevin had a good time, hey man, like the door's always open, and I know you got stuff coming down the pipe. If the powers that be say so, please feel free to come back anytime, Chris.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'll have my people call your people, I guess, however that works.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure how this happened.
Totally.
We
Yeah.
can do Sandbox trivia.
Actually, I had a bunch of trivia questions prepped.
Yeah?
I thought would have-
For us?
Oh yeah, just like for you guys or whatever. I was going to like pull up a bunch of the like crusty old developer names for things and see if people could guess what the shipping name was for a thing.
Oh, that
Oh,
sounds
come
so
on,
fun.
man. You
With the
can't do that.
future.
Okay, well, come on.
We
All
got all the
right.
time in the world. Let's go.
Yeah. All right.
By
Okay.
any
Now
chance, do you have
again, I
Cloud
want
Strike's internal name.
I think you know.
Guess it.
Zeus.
Okay, so Chris, I want to make sure I'm still respecting your time, but you've just
Yeah.
maybe like a couple of those because that sounds really fun. I want to do a few of those.
Sure. Well, Cool Guy ruined the Cloud Strike one, so now you can try and guess what Cloud Strike's dev name was. This has actually been revealed publicly once, but it was in like an Australian community meetup last year sometime.
Cool Guy, did you mention it? I didn't hear you. Did he say it out loud?
Oh, what is it?
Yeah.
You have to
I
guess it, Nerf.
Why do I have to guess? Why don't you guess?
I'm the worst at this.
You said Australian. Okay, let me think. Storm Snipe. Like, what do we think?
Oh, you're going that route, eh, Kimmy?
No, wait. Something like that.
It's not an Australian name. It was just I happened to mention it to the like Australian Destiny community.
It's Australian to me from now on.
Thor, Zeus, anything
We've got
godlike
some
with thunder?
good guesses in the chat right now. We've got Mjolnir. That's a really good guess. Damn. Boomstick. No. Thunderclap is a good one. Thunderstruck. I like that one.
Thunderstruck is a great one.
Thunderstruck.
I would've named it that.
Finger of Zeus. I don't know. Give me a hint here, Chris.
So, like the idea for Cloud Strike came out of a friend of mine saying, "Man, I really like X gun, and I wish that I had a sniper rifle version of it."
Risk Runner, but sniper.
Thunderlord.
Thunderlord. Ooh.
Sniper Lord.
Zalo Supercell. Sniper Lord.
Thunder Snipe.
Lightning Lord.
Lightning Lord. It's got to be.
Dude, I'm so.
A hand of Zeus. I don't know.
Thunder Gun.
So if we'd done this question the other way around, it would have been super, super easy.
Oh.
Okay.
All right, come on. You got to tell us.
You can just tell us.
Yeah, so we had this idea to have like a companion gun for Thunderlord.
Companion gun.
Queen. Thunder Lord. Thunder Duke.
So close.
Lightning Queen.
Thunder Duke. We're going
Thunder
through all the
Prince.
hierarchy here. Yeah.
Thunder King. I don't know what's a companion to a lord.
Sniper Ghoul.
Thunder Lady.
Thunder Lady. There we go.
Yeah.
Thunder Lady.
Oh.
I like that.
That name, but Cloud Strike is actually cooler, but it doesn't have that tie-in. Would have been fun.
Oh, somebody in Twitch chat got that.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that you should come listen to us live if you're listening right now over the weekend. Shout out to Scottish Canuck for correctly guessing Thunder Lady.
Nice.
Damn. Do you want to do one the other way where you tell us the code name and see if we can figure it out?
Yeah. What about self-extracting rounds?
What?
Self-extracting rounds.
Self-extracting rounds.
No time to explain.
Pretty close.
That's a good guess.
This is for D2, right?
Yeah.
Self-extracting rounds. Risk.
I don't want
Warner?
to say all of them.
I would have said no time to explain because I feel like that's the one that has the bullets that come back. But
I mean, Colony self-extracts itself wherever you put it. Like
Crimson?
they'll find you.
So this is not an exotic.
Oh.
It's a perk.
Rewind rounds?
Rewind rounds.
Oh, you
Hey,
said it
there
first
we go.
try.
Yeah, it's a no time to
I messed that up 3 times when I pronounce it.
Rewind rounds?
Rewind wounds.
Self-extracting rounds is easier to say.
Yeah,
Rewind
it is. That
Is
should have
it?
been how it-
It's
Rewind-
longer.
Oh yeah.
Self-extracting rounds.
Well, you have to add the ooh after we wind.
Oh,
wounds,
you.
so, like,
we
yeah,
we
it
wound
just
wounds.
adds time.
Ooh. Got. Yeah. Okay. You're right. You have to legally have to say that. You got like one more?
Let me think. Yeah, I had a bunch, but I feel like those are probably the most interesting ones. Okay, what about target lock stabilizers? That's a perk.
What? Target lock stabilizers. Oh, I think I know what it is. I'm gonna write it. Where do I write it to prove? I don't want to guess
Target
immediately and
lock
ruin the game.
stabilizers?
I have
Is
a
that-
guess.
Heating up.
Is it tomorrow's perk?
If that's not it, then I'm out because my guess was Eyes of Tomorrow.
It's a perk name.
Tunnel
It's a
vision?
perk name.
Is it any of the perks we've talked about? Or is it?
It's a actually yes, it is one of the perks we talked about, but it's an old perk.
Target lock stabilizers.
One of
It's
the-
an old perk.
Pro missile, but that ain't right.
Zen
I
moment?
think we talked about.
Zen moment, yeah.
That's I was cheating. Someone in chat said it. Someone in chat said
Target
it. I
lock
read it. I think it was
stabilizers.
bottles. It was bottles in chat. that
Oh,
said it.
that's very funny.
I'm sorry.
I
Uh,
love the. Oh, go on.
I've got one more.
Okay.
Last one.
Grenade buckler.
Grenade buckler.
Adrenaline jump. Adrenaline.
Easy one.
That's great.
Awesome.
Man, I could play that all night. That's interesting. Man, Chris, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. And I know Kevin has already left, but wherever you are, Kevin, Tocom, we appreciate both of you greatly for coming on the show, talking shop. It's just a lot of fun. It's just so interesting to hear from the chef, and we're all on the same page. It can change day to day, am I right? But overall, we love D2, and we are just thrilled for the future. And we understand that you guys put just an incredible amount of blood, sweat, and tears. So thank you for not only coming on the show, but being, honest and fully transparent when you and Kevin were, listing off your sandbox regrets. I'm like, this is, respect moment here. So big shout out to the both of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like, we're a pair of gigantic Destiny sandbox nerds. We talk about this stuff all the time by ourselves. It's always cool to talk to other people who are also into it.
Yes, thank you for your work, man.
Thank you for your time here with us. I think on behalf of all of us, on behalf of the community, Twitch, and for answering the hard questions with all questions, especially the hard ones with honesty. Thank you for your work, guys. Truly amazing. Thank you.
And do you have anything to plug? I know. Are you like you normally when we have people, we do a little, hey, where can the people find you? Do you want people to find you, or do you want to?
I mean, basically read the TWABs every so often. Being completely honest, like I have a Twitter. It's not under my real name anymore because there was a time when Destiny devs were getting death threats, and I don't want to be a target for that. It's a sad thing because most of the community is amazing, but yeah, I don't really have a public presence, so sorry, I can't give you any way to super easily contact me. You can always reach me through like our community managers if you need to, though.
Excellent. And I can only shake my head. It's it's a story that we've heard more and more in the gaming industry as of late, which is super fucking unfortunate and uncool. So with that in mind, appreciate you being on the show even more. So like always, we're gonna go around the room and tell the people at home where you can find all of us on the show. Cammy, why don't you tell the people at home where they can find you?
I'm not even going to worry about it this episode. Like, just thanks
Me
for
neither.
listening.
Oh, okay, fair
Thank
enough.
you, Bungie, for the opportunity. It was
Hell
great.
yeah. Appreciate you. Twitch chat, thank you very much for joining us. We are Firing Range. We record every other week. You can listen to us wherever you download fine quality podcasts. Thank you very much for joining all of us, and take care. We will see you next time.